This is a journey across a planet where reality is stranger than fiction. Every border presents a story. Every tradition defies logic. First fact: in Finland, there is a wife-carrying competition. And it's not a joke, it's an official sport with a designated course, obstacles, and judges. It originated in the 1990s, but its roots trace back to semi-legendary robber gangs operating in Finnish forests in the 19th century. According to legend, their leader, Herkonen, trained his men to steal food, evade pursuit, and, yes, carry off women. Modern participants, of course, have the consent of both parties. Carrying styles vary, but the so-called Estonian technique is dominant. The wife hangs upside down on the husband's back, gripping his neck and waist with her legs. The course is not a stroll on the beach. Mandatory elements include a sandy stretch, a fence, and a water pit. The wife's weight is regulated, a minimum of 49 kilograms. Otherwise, the participant receives a special weighted backpack. The main prize is not merely symbolic. The winner takes home beer weighing as much as his wife. The tournament is held annually in the town of Sankajärvi, and the audience is as large as at local hockey matches. The irony is that the discipline began as a parody but ended up on the list of national traditions. Second fact: in New Zealand, registering a child's name officially requires it to comply with a list of permitted names. This list is regularly updated, and at one point included applications such as Lucifer, Mafia No Fear, Anal, and For Real. Authorities justify this by stating that the name should not be offensive, misleading, or resemble a title. A document from 2011 also details more unusual cases. Parents attempted to name their daughter Queen Victoria and their son with nothing at all. Yes, a blank space. There was an instance where a father was refused the name Justice because it might create the illusion of a legal title. Against this backdrop, a real case from 2008 sounds almost absurd. A girl registered as Tallulah Does the Hula from Hawaii was temporarily removed from her family by court order. The judge stated, "The child suffers from a ridiculous name that makes her a laughingstock." And yes, the girl was 9 years old and refused to say her own name, even to her friends. Third fact: in Mongolia, a state program for training carrier pigeons existed for years, and this is not an archaism but a reality of the mid-20th century. After the Second World War, the country actively sought ways to establish rapid communication between remote AMOGs, administrative districts scattered across the steppes, where roads were more of a direction than infrastructure. The authorities created a special pigeon department, purchased birds in the Soviet Union and China, built pigeon lofts in Ulaanbaatar and several key hubs, and began training. Mail was delivered in one direction only. Pigeons were kept in the capital, and each district received its batch for release. The birds returned independently. Each bird had a numbered ring, and reports with phrases like "Pigeon number 226 arrived late due to strong wind" can still be found in the archives. By the 80s, the idea was abandoned. The first satellite radio stations appeared, and later, mobile technologies. However, on one of the government buildings in Ulaanbaatar, one can still find an emblem carved in stone depicting a soaring pigeon with a Cyrillic inscription, "Communication is a matter of state importance." Fact number 4. In Italy, there's a village where dying is officially forbidden. This isn't a metaphor, but a municipal decree. We're talking about Lagazza degli Ozzi, a tiny town in the Campania region. Around the turn of the 90s, the local cemetery became overcrowded, and an agreement with neighboring municipalities for the burial of new deceased was frozen due to bureaucratic confusion. The city council, without waiting for a response from the region, issued a decree. Death within the municipality is temporarily prohibited. Violators will be held accountable. The signature and seal were genuine. Of course, no one was prosecuted, but the resonance was serious. Reports on national channels, visits from journalists, and crowds of tourists wanting to see the place where dying is illegal. Locals at that time really tried. According to a paramedic, elderly patients suspected of having a heart attack were urgently transported to neighboring municipalities, just so as not to exacerbate the legal confusion. After 2 years, the situation was resolved, but the very wording, prohibition of death, became a meme and entered school textbooks as an example of legal absurdity. Fifth fact. In Japan, it's possible to buy insurance against bad weather on a date. Yes, a policy that compensates for emotional losses if rain or snow ruin romantic plans. The service appeared in the 2000s and initially seemed like a marketing eccentricity, but it turned out to work. Sompo Japan Insurance Company introduced a tariff. If on the day of the date in Tokyo, precipitation exceeds a certain level, for example 5 millimeters, the client receives compensation, from the taxi fare to a full refund of dinner expenses. The conditions are agreed upon in advance. You need to submit an application in advance, specifying the date, place, and even the partner's name, to exclude fraudulent cases. There are separate tariffs for weddings, photo shoots, and even graduation parties. The mechanism is based on data from the Japan Meteorological Agency, no subjectivity. The irony is that in 10 years, the policy has become so popular that some cafes in Shibuya and Ginza have started to include its cost in the price of romantic packages. A date without risk. The Japanese passion for accuracy and predictability has gone beyond the everyday and entered the sphere of feelings. It turned out to be not only cute, but also profitable. The level of cancellations due to weather has sharply decreased. Fact number 6. In Nicaragua, you can be imprisoned for attempting to bribe the spirit of a lake. In the 2000s, a group of farmers on the shore of Lake Cocibolca performed a ritual of water appeasement, throwing a pig, a basket of corn, and a bottle of rum into the lake. In their view, this is an old tradition to appease La Sirena, a mythological woman-fish who supposedly punishes those who take water without permission. The problem began when one of the participants recorded the ritual on video and uploaded it to the internet. A week later, the prosecutor's office opened a case. Allegedly, there was water pollution, violation of sanitary norms, and, attention, an attempt to negotiate with a supernatural being bypassing the state licensing system. The criminal wording sounded absurd, but was legally justified. According to local laws, water bodies are national property, and any actions affecting the use of water must be agreed upon with the authorities. The trial lasted almost a year. In the end, of course, the case was closed due to lack of corpus delicti, but the precedent remained. Now, local residents perform rituals without sacrifices and strictly away from cameras. And on the shore of the lake, there is a sign: coordinate any spiritual actions with the municipality. The sign is real. The photo is on Google Maps. Fact number 7. In Lebanon, a law formally permits the abduction of a woman if it ends in marriage. This rule originated in the colonial era when French law was supplemented by local customs. Until recently, an article in the country's criminal code stated, if a man abducts a girl for the purpose of marriage and marries her, the criminal case is closed. Some say it's about the protection of honor. Human rights activists counter that it's institutionalized violence. There were precedents. In 2012, one such marriage took place right at a police station to avoid imprisonment. Only in 2017, under public pressure, did Parliament vote to repeal this provision. However, it is still alive in the public consciousness, especially in remote areas where marriage by abduction is perceived not as a crime, but as a radical form of courtship. Against the backdrop of all modernization efforts, this looks like an anachronism, preserved in language and customs. It's noteworthy that the word abduction in Lebanese Arabic is often replaced by the softer removal, as if it were not a person, but an object or piece of furniture. Eighth fact. In Hungary, a department of hairdressing art still exists as part of a medical university. It is located in the city of Szeged, and its official name sounds like this: Department of Trichology and Applied Aesthetics. Formally, it is part of the Faculty of Medical Technologies, but de facto, students there learn how to cut hair, dye it, diagnose scalp skin, and talk to the client. The program is 3 years long, with exams, a diploma thesis, and an internship. There is even a mandatory course on client psychology and stress management. The explanation is, a hairdresser is the first confessor, and you need to know how to handle it. The origins of the department are in post-war Hungary, where the hairdresser's profession was considered an important part of the social infrastructure. In the 60s, a research center was created on the basis of a regular technical school, which later merged into the university structure. Now the department graduates about 30 specialists a year, and among the teachers are not only doctors, but also theatrical makeup artists, chemical technologists, and even former diplomats. One of the courses is Visual Code of Identity, how a hairstyle conveys affiliation, status, and mood. And this is not absurd. This is Eastern Europe, where between a razor and biopsychology, there is only one diploma. Fact number 9. In India, there exist trains without a fixed schedule. Their departure depends on passenger load. This isn't chaos, but rather a carefully considered logistical approach, especially useful on sparsely populated routes in rural areas where regular services would be unprofitable. These trains are called ghost trains. They are designated as reserve trains in the system, but in reality, they operate regular services dependent on passenger volume. Routes are typically short, 30 to 50 kilometers between villages and district centers. Sometimes they are not operated by the National Railway, but by regional administrations or private contractors. The system works like this. Passengers gather at the platform, the driver waits for the dispatcher signal, and only when half the carriages are full is the departure command given. In some cases, especially during the agricultural season, trains don't stop en route to avoid disrupting freight traffic. A well-known example is the train on the Madhupur-Jamtara line in Jharkhand state. According to locals, it might leave at 7 in the morning or at 3 in the afternoon, depending not on a timetable, but on the number of carts and sacks of produce. A sign at the station reads, "Next train, when ready." Ironically, these seemingly chaotic services are considered the most reliable. If it leaves, it will definitely arrive. Fact number 10. In Switzerland, flushing the toilet after 10 p.m. is prohibited in apartment buildings. This isn't a criminal offense, but rather a regulation found in local housing ordinances, governed at the cantonal or municipal level. The reason is simple. After 10 p.m., any noise that disturbs neighbors is considered a disturbance of the peace. The sound of a toilet flushing, especially in older buildings with metal pipes, falls under this rule. Of course, not everyone strictly adheres to this rule, but it is formally in effect. There have been instances where neighbors have called the police on those who use the bathroom at night. One well-known incident occurred in Basel in 2016 when a resident was fined for repeated disturbance of the peace, with active toilet flushing at night specifically mentioned in the report. As a result, architects in new buildings have started designing special, quiet bathrooms with silent flush mechanisms, improved sound insulation, and even warning signs. It's almost like a science fiction story. A country where noise is prohibited has learned to design toilets like recording studios. The main goal is to not disrupt neighbors' sleep schedules. 11th fact. In Chile, there's a town officially without streets, Sewell. Built high in the Andes as a mining settlement for workers of the El Teniente copper mine. Its peculiarity is the complete absence of roads in the conventional sense. Movement between houses, the hospital, school, and even the church is via stairs. Over 300 flights of stairs connect the levels of the town, sprawling on a mountain slope like a multi-layered termite mound. From the beginning of the 20th century, the American company Braden Copper invested in its construction, and the settlement developed as an autonomous industrial colony. The mine operated below, while housing, shops, and a cinema were located above. All cargo, from flour to building blocks, was lifted via inclined rail platforms. Cars never reached the town. There are still no roads in Sewell. After the mine's nationalization in the 70s, the settlement was gradually depopulated, but the architecture remained. Colorful houses, miners' clubs, giant staircases. Now abandoned, it's a UNESCO World Heritage Site.
Tourists reach it via a narrow mountain road, and then it's only on foot, only uphill. The irony is that the town, created for progress, became a monument to life without cars at all.
Fact number 12. In Canada, a law existed that allowed for the official dissolution of a marriage through a newspaper announcement. This practice originated in the 19th century, when, in remote areas of the country, a court divorce was a difficult and expensive process. The alternative was a notice of intention in a major newspaper. A husband would publish a text stating that his wife left the marital bed without reason, and if she did not return within 30 days, he had the right to consider the marriage dissolved. In some provinces, such announcements were legally valid, especially if unchallenged. Well-known newspapers such as the Globe and Mail, Toronto Star, and La Presse had separate sections for such notices, where they appeared alongside advertisements for yarn and bicycles. Some texts were quite formal. My lawful wife, Suzanne M., left my home in Saskatchewan on February 2nd. I request that she be considered no longer belonging to me. Only in the mid-20th century did these announcements lose their legal force, when federal legislation unified the divorce process. However, thousands of such publications remain in archives. Consequently, dozens of Canadians seriously ended their marriages through a newspaper column, as if returning a jacket to a store.
Fact 13. South Korea had a unique age calculation system different from the global standard. Before 2023, newborns were considered 1 year old at birth, and every citizen turned a year older on January 1st, regardless of their birth date. This tradition stemmed from ancient Korean beliefs equating pregnancy with the first year of life. Therefore, a child born, for example, on December 31st, became officially 2 years old on January 1st. Consequently, many Koreans had a dual age, one internal, Korean, and another international, conforming to the Western standard. After prolonged discussions and public pressure, the government decided to abolish this system. From June 2023, a law came into effect calculating age solely from the date of birth. This resulted in millions of Koreans officially rejuvenating by 1 or 2 years in their documents. Social media was flooded with posts like, "I'm 28 again," or "lost 2 years without hitting the gym." This administrative measure also had practical implications. Age in Korea affects pensions, conscription, school enrollment, and even communication etiquette. For many, it wasn't just a symbolic update, but a full-fledged change in life status.
Fact 14. In Liechtenstein, it's possible to rent the entire country. This includes the actual streets, the coat of arms, the police force, and even the keys to the castle. This eccentric option appeared in 2010 when the local authorities signed an agreement with an American company specializing in organizing exclusive events. The service is offered to companies wishing to hold a unique team-building event or to private individuals dreaming of living like a monarch. For a symbolic fee, about $700,000 per day, the client is offered full service, a personal greeting from the mayor, the renaming of streets for 1 day, the issuance of coat of arms mail, excursions to Vaduz Castle, and even access to the ceremonial guard. Initially, the news was perceived as a hoax, but in 2011, the Liechtenstein Ministry of Tourism confirmed, yes, the country is officially ready to rent itself out, with a number of restrictions, of course. The lives of citizens are not affected. Government structures continue their work, and the rental only concerns the atmospheric and protocol part. The first client was a wealthy businessman from Hong Kong who celebrated his birthday there with 50 guests. The program included a costume party, a medieval feast, and a night tour of the wineries. Critics called it simulating royal power, but Liechtenstein responded with irony. If someone wants to feel like a prince, why not give them a chance, especially if the economy benefits from it?
Fact 15. In Zambia, there existed a ministry informally known as the Ministry of National Happiness. Officially, it was called the Ministry of Religious Affairs and National Guidance. The nickname Happiness Ministry stuck due to its unique mission, overseeing the spiritual and moral well-being of the nation. It was established in 2016 by an order of President Edgar Lungu, who believed that the state should manage not only the economy, defense, and healthcare, but also the emotional climate of the country. Its responsibilities included monitoring religious organizations, combating spiritual corruption, supporting traditional values, and conducting mass prayers for the nation. The ministry published quarterly reports with graphs showing the level of national spirit, based on surveys and church activity data. A 2018 report claimed that the Moral Stability Index in Lusaka, the capital, increased by 3.5% after a series of street sermons. There was even an instance where the ministry proposed introducing a National Peace Day, a non-working day requiring mandatory silence and meditation. Although the ministry was abolished in 2021, its idea persisted. Some of its functions were transferred to other bodies, and the term national happiness is still used in parliamentary debates. In a country where a third of the population lives below the poverty line, this sounds simultaneously like hope and a farce. Yet, the initiative was official, with a budget and official documentation. Fact number 16. In the U.S. state of Nevada, it is still permissible to officially register towns with no permanent residents. One such town is Jean, located 50 kilometers from Las Vegas. Its population is 0. However, it has a name, a zip code, official status, and even a mayor, by proxy. How is this possible? It all began when businessmen purchased a plot of land in this area for the construction of a logistics hub. To simplify taxation and gain access to federal subsidies, the investors registered the plot as a municipality. Nevada law allows this if there is a charter, a source of income, e.g. from land lease or casinos, and a temporary representative who signed the documents. Jean has no schools, houses, or hospitals, only warehouses, a gas station, and a couple of slot machines. The local residents are employees who come for their shift, work, and then return to Vegas. But on paper, it's a town, with a coat of arms, a charter, and even a symbolic annual report listing achievements such as installing a new sign or painting a fire hydrant. It's almost a legal anecdote, but it embodies the essence of American bureaucratic flexibility. Where else can you build a town without building a single house? In Iran, one form of punishment is mandatory listening to classical poetry. This is not a figure of speech. In 2014, a court in Shiraz sentenced a group of teenagers arrested for indecent dancing on TikTok not to prison, but to spiritual rehabilitation. Each had to daily read and listen to the poetry of Hafez, Saadi, and Rumi, and then write essays on the meaning of what they heard. The decision caused a storm in the local press. Some admired the soft power of culture, others saw in it a mocking element. After all, poetry, as a form of punishment, loses its soul. The judge, however, stood his ground. According to him, the main goal is not to suppress, but to guide. This was not an isolated incident. In 2016, in Tehran, a man who insulted a woman in line was sentenced to read Omar Khayyam's poems aloud in a city park every morning for a month. Interestingly, such sentences fall under the category of so-called alternative punishments, permissible in the Iranian judicial system if the prosecution recognizes the crime as moral, not criminal. Human rights reports indicate dozens of such decisions, including mandatory attendance at philosophical circles, lectures on the history of Islam, and even courses in traditional calligraphic writing. Thus, in a country where much is forbidden, punishment turns into a refined form of didactics, with rhyme but without choice.
Fact 18. In Norway, some prisons resemble comfortable hostels, with a stove, a television, and keys for the inmates. The most famous example is Bastøy Island, 50 kilometers from Oslo. This ecological prison houses about 80 people convicted of minor crimes. There is no barbed wire, armed guards, or solitary confinement cells. Instead, there are wooden cottages, farm work, fishing, philosophy courses, and self-catering. Each inmate receives keys to their own cottage,
participates in creating the duty roster, and has a ferry schedule for trips to the mainland, for instance, to court or for medical checkups. The official goal is rehabilitation, not punishment. The institution's management emphasizes, we don't isolate, we socialize. The recidivism rate among former Bastoy residents is one of the lowest in Europe, less than 20%. In comparison, in the USA, it's over 60%. Of course, murderers or rapists are not sent here. We are talking about fraudsters, robbers, and tax evaders. One former inmate said in an interview, "It was like a long summer camp with a strong sense of guilt." Skeptics call this system too lenient, but Norwegians are confident. Society benefits when a person leaves prison not embittered but restored. Incidentally, the island is officially considered a green zone. 100% of its energy is generated from wind and solar power.
19th fact. In Egypt, there's a special police department dedicated to antiquities. Its task is not simply to guard museums, but also to investigate thefts, forgeries, and even alleged magical manipulations of historical artifacts. Established in 1984, the unit is officially called the Department for the Protection of Heritage and Antiquities. It has a network of agents across the country and even informants in villages, where locals sometimes find antiquities in their yards after rainstorms. The most high-profile cases involve not only attempts to smuggle sarcophagi and statues across the border, but also instances where fraudsters try to sell fake amulets with a curse. In 2008, in Giza, police arrested a man selling a genuine Tutankhamun's box crafted in a garage from a fruit crate. And in 2019, in Luxor, a whole family was apprehended for passing off a homemade gypsum sarcophagus as an artifact from the 18th dynasty. The methods of the antiquities police are at the intersection of archaeology and detective work: searches, soil analysis, examination of soil and ancient pigments. One report states that agents tracked down a gang by the trail of sand on their shoes, which matched the soil at the excavation site. This is, without exaggeration, Indiana Jones in reverse. They don't seek artifacts, they save them from the hands of imposters.
Fact number 20. In Thailand, monkeys are official participants in an annual festival held in Lopburi since 1989. This is the Monkey Buffet Festival, which began as a tourist attraction but has evolved into a significant cultural event. Giant tables are set up in the city center, laden with pineapples, watermelons, bananas, and even sweet cakes, up to 2 tons of food a day. Around 2,000 monkeys, arriving in large groups, participate in this feast. They climb statues, fight over corn, inspect visitors, snatch glasses, and sometimes even perform somersaults into fountains. Locals view this philosophically, believing that monkeys bring good luck and protect against evil spirits. Schools, businesses, and even the army participate in the preparations. Soldiers assist with setting up structures and ensuring safety. Thousands of tourists attend, and local hotels issue a warning: beware of primate theft. In one year, a guest had his passport stolen. A monkey took it from his backpack and carried it to a temple, where it sat on the roof and tore the pages. The passport wasn't recovered, but the story made headlines worldwide. Thus, in a country where the spiritual and the physical blend seamlessly in one celebration, a monkey can become not just a symbol, but a full-fledged guest at the feast. Fact number 21. Until recently, there was a ban on chess in Saudi Arabia. While not officially codified in law, in 2016, the country's Grand Mufti publicly declared that chess breeds enmity among people, distracts from prayer, and encourages gambling. This statement caused a stir. International sports organizations protested, and an unusual campaign unfolded within the country. Chess players began posting photos of their games on social media with the hashtag "Chess is not a sin." The history of the ban is not new. Back in the 1980s, religious bodies tried to equate chess with card games, especially after a fight broke out at a tournament in one city. However, chess did not disappear from the country. It continued to exist underground, in universities, community centers, and even some cafes. Official tournaments were not held, but private clubs existed. A turning point came in 2017 when Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman initiated reforms, and as part of a course towards modernizing the image, the chess ban was effectively lifted. In 2018, Riyadh hosted the World Rapid and Blitz Tournament, a landmark event. The country where chess was almost taboo now held a championship under the auspices of the International Chess Federation. Ironically, the winner was a representative of Russia, a country where chess was once also considered a bourgeois pastime. Fact number 22. In Australia, there exists a unique system of mailboxes for penguins. This is not a metaphor, but a real system devised by environmentalists on Phillip Island near Melbourne. A colony of little penguins inhabits the island, the only penguin species in the world that grows no taller than 40 centimeters. In 1985, the colony's population began to decline sharply. Penguins were losing their nests due to soil erosion and fox incursions. Scientists decided to experiment. They created artificial shelters in the form of concrete boxes, resembling mailboxes in shape, with a round entrance and a protective canopy. The boxes were placed on the coastal slopes and left for a season. After 6 months, a surprise. More than 60% of the penguins began using them as permanent housing. Since then, the project has expanded. Now, over 1,000 such shelters are installed on the island, many of which are equipped with motion sensors and thermal cameras for monitoring. Local school children paint designs and names on the boxes. George's house, nest number 207, and one can adopt a box by making a donation at the Nature Center. The irony is that the artificial box proved to be more durable and reliable than natural burrows. It doesn't leak, doesn't collapse, and is even protected from snakes. So, in Australia, the only country where penguins are found outside Antarctica, the concrete box has become synonymous with home comfort for these small birds. Fact number 23. In France, it's legally possible to sue cockroaches. This isn't a figure of speech. It's a real practice of collective lawsuits against building owners who fail to maintain sanitary conditions. Precedents have been recorded in Paris, Lyon, and Marseille. Tenants filed lawsuits citing, among other things, violation of the right to a peaceful life caused by the invasion of parasites. In some cases, photographs and samples in jars labeled "found in the kitchen," emerged from the outlet, were attached to the lawsuits. Judges naturally didn't consider cockroaches legal entities, but fines to owners reached tens of thousands of euros. In the year 2019, one such trial ended with significant publicity. The municipality declared the building a biological risk zone and ordered the management company to pay compensation to each tenant, not only for damages, but also for moral suffering from the constant presence of insects. The curious nature of the case was amplified by the plaintiff's lawyer using the phrase infrastructural terror, which was included in the court record. Sociologists call such cases a symptom of urban fatigue. When the system fails, people look for someone to blame. Thus, the cockroach became a participant in legal proceedings, and the court verdict became a tool in the fight for normal living conditions. Fact number 24. In Bolivia, a law exists that allows women with indigenous roots to take time off work to connect with the spirits of their ancestors. This provision is officially called the right to a spiritual break and is enshrined in Article 30 of the country's new constitution, adopted in 2009. The document secures the status of the indigenous population and permits the observance of traditional practices, including religious rituals, as part of labor law. In practice, this means that an Aymara or Quechua woman can take leave for a valid reason, for example, to participate in a ceremony of thanksgiving to Pachamama, the earth goddess, or to undergo a purification rite. In some regions, especially in mountainous areas, such leaves are granted regularly, and the employer is obliged to take them into account. One of the country's largest trade unions has even developed a standard application form where the reason is stated as participation in a spiritual practice recognized by the community. The authorities emphasize this is not a privilege, but the restoration of historical justice. It is noteworthy that administrative reports indicate such leaves improve the psychological state of employees and reduce conflicts within teams.
As a result, in a country where indigenous cultures were long considered secondary, they have been included in the list of official reasons for taking time off. This is not an exception, it is the norm, officially documented.
Fact 25. Chewing gum remains banned in Singapore, not just discouraged, but illegal with criminal penalties. The ban, introduced in 1992, exemplifies Singapore's approach to urban order. Anything that detracts from aesthetics or infrastructure must be eliminated. It all started with chewing gum found stuck to door sensors in metro stations, disrupting automatic systems. The cost of cleaning was estimated at millions of dollars annually. The authorities decided on a radical solution, a complete ban. Import, sale, and even public chewing were outlawed. An exception was made only in 2004 under pressure from the USA following free trade agreement negotiations. Now, only medicinal chewing gum containing nicotine or calcium is permitted by prescription from a pharmacy with passport identification. Those caught chewing without a valid reason face substantial fines, while sellers face imprisonment. There have been instances of tourists being detained at the airport for having a pack of Orbit in their luggage. Locals joke, chewing gum is like a weapon. It seems insignificant, but it must be used cautiously. The cleanliness of the streets is truly striking. Sidewalks gleam and public transport is museum-like. The price of order is the relinquishment of a habit. Unlike other countries where litter is cleaned up, in Singapore it is prevented.
Fact number 26. In the Czech Republic, there exists a state position of an official water taster. This is not a metaphor, but a technical specialist who regularly tastes water from the water supply systems directly with their mouth. In a country where beer is considered a national treasure, water is treated with no less respect. After the reforms of the 90s, when control over utilities partially passed to private operators, the need for an independent expert structure arose. Thus, the Organoleptic Control Service appeared, a body whose employees travel to wells, water intakes, and distribution stations to personally test the water for taste, smell, and color. Officially, they are called organoleptic inspectors, but colloquially, water sommeliers. One of them, Jan Novak, in an interview with a Czech newspaper, said that he can distinguish water from Moravia from water from Prague by its subtle mineral notes. The work is not easy. 8-hour shifts, strict tasting standards, breaks between samples to avoid dulling the receptors. In a month, an inspector can taste up to 600 samples. And yes, each one is documented with a protocol. Interestingly, internal standards even allow a slight smell of sulfur if it is of natural origin and short-term. It turns out that in a country where water is not just a utility but part of the cultural code, it is checked not only in a laboratory but also by taste. And while some taste wine, others taste tap water with the same passion.
Fact 27th. In Turkmenistan, during the 2000s, opera was officially banned as a genre. The justification, voiced by the then-President Sapir Murat Niyazov, was straightforward. Opera and ballet are alien to Turkmen culture. This decision shocked even those accustomed to the eccentric decrees of the leader, known as Turkmenbashi. The National Theater was reoriented. The repertoire shifted to folk performances, musical dramas using local instruments, and themed evenings celebrating the country's achievements. Musicians had to retrain. Some moved to pop music, others emigrated. Conservatory students began studying classical music underground or abroad. Some graduation concerts were held in private apartments with windows curtained. There were also absurd instances. In 2005, a symphony orchestra attempted to play Mozart, presenting it as a traditional European suite without a libretto. Only after Niyazov's death did the ban gradually soften. In 2009, opera reappeared on the Ashgabat stage, unofficially but with the tacit approval of the authorities. And in 2019, even Carmen was staged in a new interpretation, where the main character is a Turkmen girl from a border region. However, there is still no official repeal of the ban.
The irony is that the country that banned opera as alien years later accepted it, under the guise of its own interpretation, with an orchestra, but without mentioning Verdi.
Fact number 28. In Argentina, it's legally possible to be called Maradona. This applies not only to official documents, but also to religious affiliation. This is all due to the so-called Church of Maradona, an informal but registered public organization that began its activities in 1998. It was founded by fans of the legendary footballer, who devised their own calendar system, the first year after the Hand of God goal, and so on. The main temple is located in Rosario, and the number of parishioners exceeds 100,000 worldwide. They have 10 commandments, one of which is love football above all, their own symbol, a boot with a cross, and even a baptism in the name of Diego ceremony, performed in children's football schools. When asked by journalists about the line between a joke and faith, one of the founders replied, "It's a religion for those who have lost their bearings, but not their faith in a miracle with a ball." In the 2010s, the church even applied for inclusion in the Register of Non-Traditional Faiths, but was refused, with the wording religious parody. After Maradona's death in 2020, activity increased sharply. Pilgrimages to his house began, museums opened, and there were even attempts at canonization within the framework of internal symbolic rituals. Formally, it's folklore. In fact, it's a phenomenon. A country where football is above politics has created the world's first cult, where number 10 is not just a number, but a sanctuary.
Fact 29. In Sweden, a religion dedicated to copying has been officially recognized. It's called the Copymism Mission, and its founders consider the copying of information a sacred act. It all began in 2010 when a philosophy student, Isak Gerlund, wrote in his blog that he saw in the copying and dissemination of knowledge a form of spiritual insight. A year later, he registered a religious movement with a charter that outlines symbols of faith, Control-C and Control-V, rituals, file transfer, and an ethical code, not to distort information and to share it freely. According to Swedish law, the state has no right to determine the authenticity of doctrines if they do not violate the law. In 2012, the tax agency recognized Copymism as an official denomination. This caused a flurry of reactions, from mockery in the press to philosophical discussions in universities. Gerlund himself insisted that it was not a parody. We live in an era where information has become a new form of the sacred. Copying is not theft, but prayer. The church has its own structure, altar operators, truth translators, and one of the main rituals, copy service, is the mass exchange of files to the music of Bach and the sounds of a modem. At its peak, the movement numbered about 5,000 people, and although activity has subsided, the recognition remains. Thus, Sweden became the first country where file copying became not only a commonplace action, but also a religious right, with legal protection and philosophical justification.
Fact number 30. In Belgium, it's possible to receive a personal, state-appointed companion. This isn't a joke or a metaphor, but a service offered by the Centrum voor Algemeenwelzijnswerk, the Center for General Welfare. Among its programs is the Lonely Friend Project. The state matches a specially trained individual with those experiencing emotional isolation. The service is free and social, not medical. The friend doesn't treat, advise, or analyze. They simply meet regularly, listen, sometimes go for walks, or accompany the person to the store. Matching takes up to a month. Questionnaires, interviews, and a trial meeting in a neutral location. If compatible, the pair is formed for 3 months, renewable by mutual agreement. The initiative began in 2014 as a pilot project in Ghent and showed striking results. Anxiety levels and the number of visits to psychiatrists decreased by 30% in the 70-plus age group. The program has since spread nationwide. While the idea itself isn't unique, Belgium has gone further. Friends receive a small compensation from the state, undergo training, and are required to submit reports on their meetings.
One report includes the phrase, "We discussed cherry pie and suddenly felt we were living again." It turns out that in a country with one of the highest levels of individualism, formalized friendship has become a remedy for loneliness.
Fact number 31. Iceland possesses a database allowing individuals to check for potential familiar relationships with romantic partners. This database, called Íslendingabók, or Book of Icelanders, encompasses almost the entire history of the country's population, starting from the 9th century. Its creation stemmed not from romantic concerns, but from genetic ones. Iceland's population of approximately 400,000 is largely descended from about 900 original settlers. This makes Icelandic society genetically homogeneous, increasing the risk of accidental kinship in romantic relationships. In 1997, geneticist Kari Stephenson and programmer Fridrik Skulason launched Íslendingabók as an online project, incorporating over 1 million names with genealogical links, tracing back to the initial settlements. All citizens have access. They simply input their identification number and that of their potential partner. The system issues a warning if it finds common ancestors within 7 generations. One developer recalled a wedding where the couple discovered they shared a great-great-great-grandmother. While not grounds for divorce, it left an unpleasant aftertaste. A student joke at the University of Reykjavik emerged. Database first, then kiss. Interestingly, the project, initially conceived as a scientific endeavor, has become part of everyday ethics. Checking for kinship is not a sign of distrust, but an element of Icelandic etiquette. In the land of volcanoes and sagas, technology helps avoid overly close relationships.
Fact 32. In the Democratic Republic of Congo, it is still officially permitted to pay taxes in kind. In remote regions where monetary transactions are difficult, the state accepts eggs, bananas, goats, cassava, and even fish as payment. This practice originates from the time of Belgian colonial rule, when peasants were obliged to surrender a portion of their harvest as a tax in kind. After gaining independence in 1960, the system was not abolished, but simply adapted. The law allows local municipalities to determine alternative forms of payment if banking infrastructure is lacking. In practice, this looks like this. A resident comes to the administration with 2 buckets of corn and receives a receipt for land tax payment. In some cases, the products are immediately sent to school canteens or hospitals. Interestingly, a curious incident was recorded in one region. A man paid his taxes with 2 live chickens, but one escaped before registration, raising the question of whether half the payment should be counted. Eventually, the chicken was found and the tax was credited. Economists debate. Some consider it an atavism, others a sign of flexibility. In reality, it is a working system where there are no banks, but there is a harvest. And even if the receipt smells of mango, it still has legal force.
Fact 33. In Madagascar, every family burial can be the site of an annual picnic. This refers to the Famadiana tradition, the turning of the bones, a ritual where relatives exhume the remains of their ancestors, wrap them in new cloth, and dance with them. This is not shocking or barbaric, but an ancient ritual with sacred meaning. According to the Malagasy belief, the soul finally leaves the body only after several years of rest, and each Famadiana ritual accelerates this process. The ceremony turns into a multi-day celebration. Dozens of people gather, music plays, food is prepared, and the bodies of the ancestors, carefully wrapped in silk, are taken out of the tombs and aired. They are lifted onto shoulders, people talk to them, dance with them, and take photographs. Yes, this is permitted. In some cases, relatives even place fresh newspapers nearby so that the ancestor is up to date on the news. The ceremony is held every 7 to 9 years, and the expenses often exceed the family's annual income. There have been cases where loans were taken out for the Famadiana. The authorities have tried to restrict the practice due to sanitary risks, especially during outbreaks of infections, but the locals resist. For them, it is an act of respect that strengthens family ties. One elder told journalists,
We take care of the dead because they are our flesh and our memory. It turns out that in Madagascar, the boundary between life and death is not a wall, but a stage, with dances, traditions, and the smell of grilled meat.
W Polsce, hundreds of streets are named after animals. This practice began during the reforms of the 90s, when Soviet and party names were being massively replaced in cities. Residents of Warsaw, Kraków, and other cities submitted numerous petitions for neutral or warm names. Thus appeared streets named Hedgehog, Cat, Sheep, Bee, and even Snail. In the suburbs of Gdańsk, there is a Badger Street, and in Lodz, a Peacock Street. In 2008, an entire district on the outskirts of Wrocław received animal-themed names. Streets of Beaver, Bear, Owl, and Unicorn, although the latter has never lived in Poland. Municipal authorities did not object. Animal names were perceived as a symbol of care, comfort, and a way out of ideological tension. Residents quickly adapted to the innovations. It became easier for children to remember addresses, and postmen made fewer mistakes. Later, the practice reached a new level. Some schools held votes on the names of new streets, and animals won. The Giraffe Street was opened by schoolchildren, who also attached the street sign. Today, such streets have become a hallmark of city outskirts. They are photographed, posted on Instagram, and sometimes the signs are stolen. Cat Street signs are stolen most often. Ironically but true, in a country with a difficult history and strong political polarization, animal names proved to be the most conflict-free way to name a road home.
Fact number 35. In Myanmar, banknotes feature images of a rooster, an elephant, a lion, and even a fish, but not a single politician. This is a result of a decades-long policy of refusing to put leaders' portraits on money. The reason is not modesty, but superstition and fear of the banknote curse. In the 1980s, the then leader of the country, General Ne Win, suddenly withdrew almost all banknotes from circulation and introduced new ones, with denominations that were multiples of 19. This was explained by astrology. The general's personal soothsayer claimed that 19 was his lucky number. The economy collapsed. Thousands of people lost their savings. Since then, the population has become suspicious of banknotes, and images of people on them are seen as a potential source of misfortune. When the return of portraits to money was later discussed, a group of monks submitted a collective petition to the Ministry of Finance. Don't risk it, the spirit of money doesn't like faces. As a result, banknotes began to be issued with images of animals, pagodas, bridges, and even mythical creatures. The Chinte lion, a guardian of Buddhist temples, is especially popular. In one series, its image is complemented by a barely visible silhouette of a temple at an angle, and it is believed that rubbing it will bring good luck in trade. Tourists often take such banknotes as amulets. Thus, in a country where power changed through coups and manifestos, money remained the territory of symbols, animals and spirits, but not people.
Fact 36. In Brazil, it's officially possible to register a ritual marriage with oneself. This practice, called solagami, has received legal recognition in several states, including São Paulo and Rio de Janeiro. The essence, a person organizes a full-fledged wedding ceremony, signs a contract with themselves, and receives a symbolic marriage certificate. The initiative began with women's movement activists advocating self-acceptance and independence from societal expectations. In 2016, Laura Medeiros, an accountant from Belo Horizonte, held the first such ceremony, in a white dress, with a ring, to the applause of friends, and a vow to herself. Since then, the number of solagamists has grown. Agencies have begun organizing ceremonies, offering all-inclusive self-weddings, and some hotels offer special discounts. A market for accessories has also emerged. Double rings for both ring fingers, mirrors engraved with "You are my everything," and cards saying "Happy Anniversary, Beloved Me." Critics call it a cult of narcissism, but participants claim it's an act of empowerment, especially for those who have experienced divorce or trauma. Legally, such a union, of course, doesn't grant rights to inheritance or tax benefits, but such records are kept in the registry office database.
It turns out that in a country where wedding traditions are a matter of family clan, a new model has appeared. Bride, groom, and spectator all in one person. And this marriage will certainly last until you get tired of yourself.
Fact number 37. In Canada, it's possible to obtain citizenship for correcting a grammatical error in an official document. This happened in 2008. A Romanian immigrant, Vlad Horvat, discovered an inaccuracy in an immigration application form. The English version lacked an article, which altered the legal meaning of the clause concerning work history. Horvat sent an official letter to the Ministry of Citizenship and Immigration with an explanation, examples, and references to the Oxford Standard Grammar. 2 months later, he received a reply: gratitude, acknowledgement of the error, and an offer of a simplified naturalization procedure. At that time, Horvat lacked 2 months to meet the required residence period. But at the ministry's discretion, he was granted an exception. Internal regulations allowed rewarding acts of special initiative, and the case of the Romanian meticulous person became an example of how thoroughness can overcome bureaucracy. The story appeared in the press, and the ministry began receiving letters from other immigrants with discovered errors. Some were far-fetched, but one case with the translation of the French expression preuve de résidence did influence the updating of forms. Thus, Canada, a country where law and grammar reign supreme, confirmed its reputation as a state where even a comma can change one's destiny. Fact number 38. In Indonesia, in the Banten province, there is a village called Baduy Dalam, inhabited by the Baduy people. Approximately 5,000 people live there, and they voluntarily reject all forms of modernity: electricity, mobile phones, televisions, and of course, the internet. Their motivation is religious. The Baduy believe that contact with technology disrupts the balance between humans, nature, and the spirits of their ancestors. The villagers wear only traditional clothing made of unbleached cotton, travel on foot, build houses without nails, and reject any form of synthetics. Tourists are allowed to enter, but under certain conditions. Phones must be left at the border, photography is prohibited, and overnight stays are only permitted with the permission of the village elder. The government attempted to bring electricity lines to the village, but faced resistance. Even the National Identity Card program encountered a barrier. Many Baduy do not want to have ID cards, as they believe that a name fixed on plastic loses its power. Interestingly, there is an outer circle, Baduy Luar, where people already use some of the benefits of civilization. They act as a kind of buffer zone between the world of smartphones and the world where cloth is still made from tree bark. It turns out that in a country with a population of 260 million, where TikTok is almost a religion, there is a corner where they don't know what Wi-Fi is and don't want to know. Fact 39. In Germany, there exists an officially registered profession, apology formulator. This service is in demand in the legal, business, and private sectors. The specialist's task is to help clients apologize correctly, competently, politely, and considering all the nuances of German etiquette. The profession emerged in the early 2000s when large corporations faced the problem of poorly formulated apologies leading to lawsuits. One poorly chosen word, and the client feels formality, not remorse. Several lawyers and psycholinguists then united to form the consulting group Entschuldigungskultur GmbH, Culture of Apologies. They began offering letter templates, conducting trainings, and then representing companies. Gradually, the practice spread to the private sphere. Spouses hire apologizers for delicate divorces, parents for conflicts with teachers, neighbors for noise disputes. The service is available in written, a letter with precise lexical analysis, and oral, a personal apology including facial expressions, voice, and pauses. Within the profession, there are specializations: medical errors, dismissals, family conflicts. One of the leading specialists, Dr. Michael Kramer, states, "A good apology is an act of precision. It should extinguish emotion, not provoke a counter-reaction." Thus, in a country where order is valued above compromise, the art of saying sorry has become not a gesture of goodwill, but a paid service. In Nigeria, a law exists that punishes false accusations of witchcraft. Article 210 of the Nigerian Criminal Code concerning public declarations of witchcraft clearly states, a public accusation of witchcraft without proof results in a fine or other punishment. The law's intention is to protect women and children from the prevalent practice of witch hunting in some regions. It has been in effect since the mid-20th century, but active enforcement began only in the last 2 decades due to an increase in violence. Teenagers being driven from their homes, women being beaten, and villages conducting cleansing ceremonies. In 2009, a high-profile trial took place in Calabar. A man who called his neighbor a devil's conduit after her goat twice entered his garden was fined. The court specifically emphasized, belief does not exempt one from the law. Consequently, human rights organizations have emerged to monitor compliance with this anti-witchcraft legislation. One of them, the Child's Rights and Rehabilitation Network, publishes reports, operates a hotline, and establishes shelters. Billboards have appeared in cities stating, "Accusation without proof is a crime." Therefore, in a country where belief in the supernatural remains commonplace, the state attempts to regulate even the fight against witchcraft within a legal framework. In this struggle, words are also a weapon, and a punishable one at that. Fact 41. In the Republic of South Africa, one popular radio station broadcasts in 31 languages. This is Radio Sonder Granza, created as an experiment in multilingualism and national equality. Starting as a project in 2 languages, Afrikaans and English, it quickly faced protests from listeners who associated both languages with colonialism and apartheid. The management then made a radical decision. Every week, programs, news bulletins, and music are broadcast in all officially recognized languages of South Africa, including Zulu, Xhosa, Sesotho, Tswana, Tonga, Venda, and others. Even sign language for the deaf is recognized as equal and presented via video stream with sign language interpretation. This created a unique format: a morning talk show in Xhosa, a midday cooking show in Sesotho, and evening local rock bands in Afrikaans. Some programs are translated, others are not. The idea is for the listener to sometimes not understand, but feel a sense of belonging. The station's journalists joke, "We never get bored. Even if you didn't understand half the broadcast, you at least learned how another language sounds." In 2017, the station received a UNESCO prize for its contribution to preserving linguistic diversity. In a country where language can be both a boundary and a bridge, the radio station has become an echo of reconciliation. In Iran, until recently, officially approved dolls without noses were sold. These were presented as an alternative to Barbie dolls, banned in the country as a tool of Western propaganda. In the 1990s, when the government launched a campaign for cultural self-identification, Western toys, cartoons, and dolls, including Barbie, were banned due to their unacceptable appearance. In response, the Sarah and Dare doll line was created, a girl and a boy in national dress, with traditional facial features, and a characteristic immediately noticed, a lack of a pronounced nose. The developers explained, "This makes it easier to avoid caricature and maintain the universality of the image." However, the public quickly nicknamed them noseless ones. They were sold in boxes with quotes from poets and short biographies of the characters. Sarah is a schoolgirl who enjoys reading the Quran and drawing. Dare is an athlete who dreams of becoming a doctor. Amidst cultural isolation, the dolls received official certification as toys that strengthen Islamic identity. However, in practice, children preferred smuggled Barbie dolls, secretly imported through Turkey and the UAE. Ironically, the attempt to create an alternative to a Western doll resulted in a counterculture that was discussed more by adults than played with by children. Today, the noseless ones are rare, but in Tehran, one can still find an antique shop where Sarah and Dare stand in the window next to dolls from the Shah's era.
In New Zealand, there is an official position of State Wizard established in 1990. The first and, for a long time, the only holder of this title was Ian Brackenbury Channell, a British citizen who moved to Christchurch in 1974. He began with street performances, absurd parades, and so-called climate correction rituals. Initially, he was considered an eccentric, but over time he gained popularity, and the municipality recognized his contribution to the city's culture. In 1990, the mayor's office issued him a certificate stating State Wizard of New Zealand. His annual salary was about 16,000 New Zealand dollars. His duties included encouraging tourism, fostering imagination, and promoting cultural thinking. He participated in various ceremonies, presented diplomas to graduates, and even conducted cloud dispersal using a megaphone. Over the years, Ian became a local legend. The government's decision in 2021 to terminate his contract caused public outrage. Critics argued that magic is not just a budget item, but the soul of the country. Ian himself stated, "A world without magic is an accounting report, and there is no love in a report." He still appears on the streets in his robe and with a staff, attracting tourists who ask, "Is he the real one?" Locals reply, "He is the only one we chose not for promises, but for a miracle."
Fact 44. In Sierra Leone, it's officially possible to cancel a wedding via radio. In rural areas of the country, where internet and mobile phone access remain a luxury, local radio stations serve as a multifunctional social platform. They not only broadcast news and weather forecasts, but also publish announcements of broken engagements. The format is called public disengagement, and it consists of a short announcement, the bride's name, the groom's name, the village, the reason for the breakup, and, often, an expression of gratitude for the time spent together. One such message stated, "Abdullah and Fatima from Bundu Junction have parted ways, by mutual agreement. We wish each other peace and prosperity." Such announcements have almost legal force. They are accepted as proof of the termination of an oral agreement if a later dispute arises over the return of gifts or the payment of bride price. Some stations have even introduced special airtime slots for social divorces. And in one region, a regular announcer with a soothing voice reads these announcements. There have also been curious incidents. One groom learned he had been dumped by hearing the announcement accidentally on a bus. On the other hand, this mechanism solves many problems. In a society where paper bureaucracy is difficult to access, radio remains the fastest way to officially say, "It's over," without scandal, but forever.
In Romania, schools operate that cater to tourists wishing to experience the persona of Dracula. The initiative began in the village of Bran in 1980s, when locals decided to capitalize on the legend of Vlad the Impaler. Reconstruction of the original castle proved difficult, so they created courses focused on the art of nocturnal life. The curriculum includes acting, Gothic makeup techniques, vampire etiquette, and an introduction to Romanian folklore. The course lasts one night. After sunset, participants receive cloaks, new names, undergo an initiation, and learn the rules of conduct in otherworldly society. Rules include not taking photos in mirrors, not saying thank you before midnight, and always offering a guest a glass of wine without asking what it is. Initially, it was a playful project, but after the release of Interview with a Vampire and other Gothic films, applications increased dramatically. Today, there's a whole network of Școala de Noapte schools with branches in 3 regions. Graduates receive diplomas stating, "completed the path into the night, and the night completed its path in him." The government doesn't interfere. It's considered a cultural pastime.
Thus, Romania, a country with a tragic history and complex image, has transformed a bloody legend into an educational attraction with elements of theater and wine.
Nailao, there's a special text for monks who talk Tulai. This unusual levy isn't included in general legislation, but exists within individual monastery regulations, particularly in northern provinces. The logic is simple. Silence is a virtue, and excessive talking disrupts internal discipline and distracts others from meditation. One monastery has a sign at the entrance. To chatter is to dissipate is to not purify is to pay. The system works on the principle of violated, donate to the box. A violation isn't just loud speech, but also excessive commentary in everyday life. Instead of yes and no, discussions, complaints, jokes. Once, at Wat Sen Monastery in Luang Prabang, the abbot introduced a fine of 1 cup of rice for each unnecessary word spoken after the evening bell. Within a week, the monks collected almost a sack of rice, which they then gave to a local orphanage. The mechanism is simple, like all Buddhist ethics. Want to talk, but remember there's a price. In the modern world, where sound fills everything, this text sounds almost like a provocation. Yet it works. Monasteries in Laos remain places where silence is not the absence of words, but a space of power. And a word that has gained a price is not so readily spoken.
In the southern part of Chile, a unique system of forest traffic lights operates, regulating the movement of pumas. This is part of the City and Wild Nature project, launched in the Punta Arenas area, where urbanization intersects with the habitat of these large cats. Pumas have long inhabited Patagonia, but with the expansion of city limits, they've begun to enter the suburbs, first at night, then during the day. There have been instances of pumas jumping school fences, appearing on roads, and being captured on dash cams. Instead of eliminating the predators, the authorities decided to integrate them. They installed thermal imagers, tracking systems, and, most importantly, traffic lights on 3 key roads. When a sensor detects a puma approaching, the system turns on a red light, simultaneously sending a notification to a mobile app for local residents. One of the project engineers stated, "The puma doesn't understand it's in a city, but we can understand that we are in the forest." The program has been operating since 2020 and has already saved many lives, both animal and human. Volunteers educate children. If you see a red light on a forest road, wait, it means someone with fangs is coming. The project has received international recognition and is preparing for expansion. The irony is that where in most countries the animal would be shot, in Chile it was given a green light, or rather a red light, to allow it safe passage.
In the Netherlands, there exists a tradition of reverse Santa, a Christmas character who receives gifts from children. His name is Zwarte Piet, or Black Pete, and his origins trace back to medieval legends. According to one version, Piet is Sinterklaas, the Dutch Santa Claus, assistant who keeps a list of good and bad children and takes the naughty ones away in a sack. However, since the mid-20th century, this tradition has taken an unexpected turn. In several cities, children began giving Piet gifts: apples, nuts, letters of gratitude. This became a response to growing criticism of Piet's image as a racist stereotype. His traditional depiction with dark skin and large earrings caused protests and international condemnation. In response, some communities began a transformation. Now, Piet is not a punisher, but a tired courier who needs support. Schools hold events. Give Piet a break. Children draw beds for him. Give him tea and chocolates. Sinterklaas himself expresses gratitude on national television. Without you, Piet wouldn't have made it through December. In some cities, Piets of different colors have even appeared: blue, green, purple. As a result, the old myth wasn't abolished. It was rewritten. Thus, a country that knows how to live below sea level has also learned how to lower pressure, not by destroying dams, but by changing the course of traditions. In Italy, there's a small town called Borsellino in the province of Asti, officially recognized as the Town of Laughter. Several days each year, residents celebrate the Day of Mandatory Laughter. This tradition began in the 1950s after the war, when the mayor decided, if nothing else brings joy, let's try scheduled laughter. The first celebration took place in the town square with the motto, "Laughing is not embarrassing." Residents promised to make at least one stranger smile. Soon, it became an official town holiday involving schools, the church, and even the local police. Today, it's a 3-day festival featuring competitions for the loudest laugh, group comic readings, funny plays, and even a clown parade with people dressed in pajamas, socks, and foam hats. During the festival, some shops let customers pay by telling jokes. At the town hall, there's even a sign. Frowning during the festival is prohibited. Violators must tell a joke out loud. Tourists visit from all over just to take part in this unusual celebration. And surprisingly, forced laughter has led to more genuine joy.
Fact number 50. Jamaica maintains a register of recognized prophets. Officially called the National Register of Spiritual Advisors, it was established in 2013 following a series of scandals involving fraudulent fortune tellers who misled people, extorted money, and sometimes caused tragedies. The regulatory program, developed by the Ministry of Social Development, includes certification for individuals offering spiritual counseling services. Inclusion in the register requires a psychological interview, at least 5 years of verified practice, a recommendation from the local community, and signing a code of ethics. Particular attention is paid to those claiming abilities in visions, communication with spirits, or foretelling the future. These claims are not formally prohibited but require precise wording and a mandatory refusal to offer medical advice. The ministry's website even features a map showing the number of official seers in each district and their consultation hours. One such prophet, known as Braza Faya, became the subject of a documentary film. He practices only during the full moon, speaks in rhyme, and wears an official government badge. The very existence of the register is a unique compromise between a deeply rooted culture of prophecy and the need for legal control. In a country where faith is a way of life, the government decided prophets may exist, but only with a license. Fact 51. In Mongolia, there's a law allowing a camel to inherit property. This is possible if the camel is recognized as a family member with social significance. The basis is an ancient code recorded in the 15th century and updated in the 21st century to reflect modern legal norms. In the traditional nomadic lifestyle, a camel is not merely transportation, but a participant in the household economy, often with a registered pedigree and even a spirit guardian. Some families formally register ownership of part of their property, a yurt, a cart, or livestock, in the camel's name. This is done through a notary, with mandatory witnesses and a shaman who confirms the identity and spirit of the animal. After the owner's death, a portion of the inheritance can be registered to the camel. Its upkeep is covered by the inheritance, and the formal manager is the eldest son. In one case in the Gobi region, a camel named Jacques Sandor received the right to half the herd and nominal ownership of 3 carts. His representative was the deceased's youngest grandson, with a signature stating that he acts in the interests of the worthy animal. This practice is controversial. Critics call it an anachronism, supporters see it as part of the national soul. The Ministry of Agriculture even published a brochure, How to Register an Inheritance for an Animal. So, in a country where the wind is the road, a camel can be more than just a friend, a legally recognized relative. Point 52. In Luxembourg, city cemeteries have installed vending machines dispensing mineral water, not for the living, but for the flowers. These machines are a result of strict environmental regulations and cultural sensitivity towards graves. It all started in the 2000s when authorities noticed that plastic bottles brought by visitors for watering created litter, spoiled the appearance of cemeteries, and were often left behind at memorials. Then the Luxembourg municipality developed a green initiative for cemetery maintenance. Free drinking water dispensers were installed in several cemeteries. Water is dispensed by a foot pedal. The tap has a holder for a watering can, and nearby is a rental point for metal watering cans. A €1 coin is required as a deposit for the can, which is returned after use. The inscription on the sign reads, "For those who care with respect." The machines are regularly cleaned, and the water undergoes sanitary checks. Some cemetery sections even received a green standard mark for implementing this system. Locals say, if the water here is like in a pharmacy, then we are caring correctly. It turns out that even in the matter of remembering the dead, Luxembourg prioritizes practicality, cleanliness, and automation. And yes, the flowers now wilt less quickly. Fact number 53. In Pakistan, there's a single nationally approved scent for mosques. Officially named Masjid Fragrance, it was developed by the Institute of Islamic Culture in collaboration with the Ministry of Religious Affairs. The initiative began in 2015 following complaints from worshippers in several cities about varying mosque scents, some fragrant, others smelling of mildew and street dust. This led to a need for standardization. After surveys and tests on volunteers, a specific fragrance was created. A blend of rose oil, woody musk, and a light sandalwood note. It contains no alcohol, and all components are permissible under Sharia law. The mixture is supplied to mosques as sprays or aromatic oils, depending on the regional climate. The scent proved so popular that some provinces began purchasing it for schools and government buildings. Furthermore, counterfeits appeared. Bottles labeled Real Masjid scent were sold on the streets of Karachi as a means of purifying the home atmosphere. One imam jokingly remarked in an interview, "Now you can tell by the smell where a real mosque is and where it's just a room with a carpet." This fragrance has become a kind of invisible national flag. You can't see it, but it's there. In a country where division often outweighs unity, even a scent can be an attempt to create a shared space. Fact 54. In Finland, there's a national competition for carrying radio receivers. This is part of the Yukon Kanto Festival, known for its main event, wife carrying. But this festival has a side event, no less absurd, Radio Kanto, or radio carrying. The essence is simple. Participants must carry a heavy Soviet radio receiver from the 1970s on their shoulder through an obstacle course, in bog boots, across a log, through a mud pit, and with a mandatory trick, turning on the music in the middle of the route. The competition originated from a spontaneous joke. One local pensioner brought an old VEF to the festival and joked that it was also a worthy partner. The idea caught on. The rules became stricter. The receivers became certified. The weight, no less than 6 kilograms. The winner is not only the fastest, but also the one with the signal purity. If the receiver turns off or crackles, there's a penalty. In recent years, participants have begun to customize the devices. They paint them, hang badges, and come up with names. One contestant from Turku brought a receiver that read, "My grandfather listened to Radio Liberty. I carry it like a cross." This is not just a sport. It's farce, irony, and a tribute to an era where the radio voice was almost sacred. So, in a country where silence is almost a national trait, the roar of an old radio has become the sound of collective memory, and, as it turned out, quite a cheerful one. Fact 55. In Tanzania, the teaching of magic is officially permitted in universities. These are not Hogwarts-like faculties of witchcraft, but academic disciplines studying traditional beliefs, rituals, and their impact on society. The University of Dar es Salaam, the country's main university, has a department of cultural anthropology and applied magic, where students take courses on ritual analysis, spell structure, herbal medicine, and symbolism. Subjects include semiotics of the amulet, magic and identity, and the history of exorcism. The goal is not to teach students to practice magic, but to understand how magical thinking shapes behavior, choices, and political structures in villages. The lecturers are not witches, but ethnographers, psychologists, and sometimes shamans with special academic status. One of them, Professor Mwele, claims, "To understand Tanzania without magic is like studying London without the underground." According to surveys, up to 80% of the population has consulted healers at least once. The government does not encourage superstition, but uses research to combat fraud. Based on university reports, dozens of pseudo-shamanistic firms posing as healers have been shut down. It turns out that science and witchcraft do not conflict, but run parallel. One explains, the other heals, and both operate under the university's aegis.
In Portugal, in an old monastery in the Alentejo region, there is a unique library, the Library of Sounds, Biblioteca dos Sons. Instead of books, its collection consists of sound recordings, floorboards creaking, a bell ringing, the wind rustling through cypress trees, the voice of an elderly woman reading a letter from 1943. It all began with a project to digitize disappearing sounds, those characteristic of rural Portugal, which are disappearing along with generations. Sound engineer João Vieira began collecting the sounds, going to people's homes and recording the clicks of an old light switch, an old man's cough, the crackling of bread in an oven. Initially, it was a personal archive, but later access was open to the public. Today, the library contains over 5,000 sounds. They are classified by time of day, emotion, and location. A visitor can sit in a sound cocoon and listen to, for example, An Evening in a Tailor's House, 1952. Some tracks are accompanied by explanations. This is a dog that no longer barks. Her name is Mimi. The project received a grant from UNESCO and recognition as cultural archiving of intangible heritage. In a world where noise has become the background and silence a luxury, Portugal has built a temple of sounds, without books, but with voices. And each one is a memory that cannot be read, but can be heard.
Point 57. In South Sudan, one type of currency is a cow, not figuratively, but literally. The country operates parallel monetary and so-called livestock economy systems, where almost all life events, marriage, divorce, apology, compensation for damage are valued in livestock. The official currency is the South Sudanese pound, but in rural areas it is practically not used. Instead, cows are used. How much does a bride cost? From 20 to 50. For adultery, 3 cows. For accidental harm, 7. There are also complex calculations. One man in Warrap State gave the victim's family 3 cows, 1 bull, and 20 goats, in fairness and as a sign of respect. The government does not object. It even issued a handbook, Recommended Compensation Rates, which lists the prices for typical cases. In some schools, arithmetic is taught through livestock. An example from the textbook: you have 5 cows. You give 1 to your mother-in-law and 1 to your wife. How many are left? Economists argue, but admit, in the absence of banks, inflation, and distrust of the state, a cow is more reliable than paper money. It cannot be counterfeited, gives milk, and gives birth to new units of account. It turns out that in the world's youngest state, a centuries-old exchange system proved more stable than all reforms.
Item 58. En France-Polynésie, un loi prohibe donner des noms qui sont considérés trop sades. Name registration est gouverné non seulement par linguistique et religieuses normes, mais aussi par émotionnel impact. Cela commença dans les années 1980 quand Local Civil Registry Offices réceptionnèrent ces vraies applications pour unusuels noms. Solitudo, loneliness, tristesse, sadness, défaite. Certains parents voulaient commémorer personnelle ou familiale tragédie en cette manière. Un fader qui perdit sa femme durant Chalbert n'aima sa daughter souvenir, memory. Public réaction fut sharp. Children devenaient le target de jokes, souffraient à school et en adolescence offrant changer leur nom. Le ministère de la Justice a alors introduit une règle. Names qui évoquent persistantes négatives associations sont prohibés. Le registrant officiel doit assesser non seulement la grammaticale forme, mais aussi l'émotionnel effet. En cas de dispute, une commission de linguistes et psychologues est formée. The written case when the name Nuit, night, was allowed only after the parents proved that it referred not to darkness but to a romantic meeting. Today, lists of acceptable names are published annually. Thus, in a region where names carry deep symbolic meaning, the state has become a filter against excessively personal dramas. A word spoken in pain must now pass through a regulatory process.
Point 59. In Norway, it's possible to appoint a state-appointed godparent for a child. This isn't a religious figure, but a social mentor, a participant in a national program supporting children in difficult situations. The Fodderbarn Project started in 2006 as a volunteer initiative, but later received government funding. The goal is to provide children from vulnerable families with an adult who is neither a relative nor an official, but who can be a friend, advisor, and support. Candidates undergo selection, psychological testing, empathy courses, and child safety training. Then a pair is selected, a child and a godparent. Contact is regular. Walks, household help, conversations, everything is voluntary but systematic. One mentor's questionnaire states, "I will not be your parent. I will be you as you grow." According to the Ministry of Family Affairs, participation in the program reduces the risks of depression, school isolation, and domestic violence. There are cases where such godparents became part of the family for decades. One was included in the ward's will as the first person who taught me to laugh without fear. In a country where everything is well planned, from pensions to parks, there's room for an unpredictable feeling formalized by instruction. A state-appointed godparent may not be a guardian angel, but becomes a witness to a child's growth, which even relatives don't always manage to provide.
Fact number 60. In Egypt, bread can be purchased using a fingerprint. This system was implemented in 2014 as part of the fight against corruption and leakage in the food subsidy program. The state subsidizes bread. One loaf costs a citizen a few piastres, but no more than 5 per day. Previously, the system was based on paper cards, which were widely counterfeited. As a result, bakeries wrote off tons of products to non-existent clients. Then the Ministry of Supply introduced the Tamween digital platform, which includes biometric data. When buying bread, the client applies their finger to a scanner, and the system debits their daily allowance. Everything happens in seconds. The baker sees the name, account number, and remaining balance on the screen. If a person doesn't come, the balance is burned. Initially, people reacted with distrust, especially in rural areas where technology was perceived as spying. But later, biometrics became part of everyday life. Some bakeries now display signs, "Only by finger, fair for everyone." The system helped reduce theft by millions of dollars. It turns out that in a country where pharaohs built pyramids by the stars, bread is now given not by favoritism, but by fingerprint, and, as it turned out, is more reliable than a signature.
In 2018, Venezuela experienced a period where paper money weighed more than its actual value. Inflation reached such levels that a kilogram of Bolivar-based waste paper sold for more than the nominal value printed on the bills. Consequently, bolivars were used for purposes other than their intended use: crafts, origami, tapestries, and even shoes. A craftsman from Maracaibo launched a line of wallets made from old bolivars, stating, "Now there's at least irony in this, a wallet made of money itself." Tourists bought them as souvenirs, while locals struggled to pay for a loaf of bread with bags full of bills. In response to this absurd situation, the authorities announced a redenomination, removing 5 zeros and printing new banknotes, a situation that repeated itself 6 months later. Some families then began using old banknotes as wallpaper, on the walls of cafes, apartments, and even inside buses.
One school class completely covered their classroom with banknotes, writing on the wall, "We are learning economics from the inside." At some point, a board game called Bolivar Monopoly became popular, using real banknotes with a million Bolivar denomination instead of dollars. Thus, in a country rich in oil, money ceased to be an equivalent of value, but found a new life as a material, an art object, and a bitter memory.
In South Korea, in the industrial park of Daegu City, there is a unique cemetery for robots. It resembles a regular park with well-maintained paths, flowers, and informative signs. However, instead of graves, there are stands with the remains of robots, dissected bodies, wires, and QR codes. These robots served in various fields: industry, education, and healthcare. The initiative to create such a cemetery emerged in 2019 after an exhibition of decommissioned robots at Kyungpook National University, where people started bringing flowers. People who worked with these robots explained their actions by saying they were part of the team, even if they didn't breathe. The management of the technopark decided to create a permanent place for farewell. Each robot has a nameplate with its function and a short biography. For example, Alpha 5, parts sorter, served on the line from 2008 to 2020. Or Sun Ho, chemistry teaching assistant, malfunctioned during an experiment. Students hold memorial ceremonies, lighting candles and reading essays. One professor admitted, "When you work with a machine every day, its failure is almost like a colleague's illness." The development of emotional AI raises the question, what if robots also need a ritual? The cemetery doesn't provide an answer, but it creates a form. It turns out that in a country where technology has become a religion, even a robot is entitled to a final right, albeit with a battery instead of a soul.
Fact 63. In Cambodia, there's a law prohibiting the sale of ancient bricks. This concerns the Angkor temples and surrounding structures, many of which are still crumbling due to time and climate. Before the 2000s, locals often collected old bricks and used them as building material, making curbs, paving yards, even building ovens. Archaeologists raised the alarm. 13th century bricks were disappearing by the hundreds, and their restoration was impossible. Each one is unique in composition and form. The government then passed a law classifying such bricks as cultural heritage. They cannot be sold, exported, gifted, or used without special permission. Violation results in a fine and confiscation. There was a case where a farmer tried to sell a brick with remnants of Khmer script to a tourist and received a suspended sentence. Now, in the Angkor area, there are even brick patrols, volunteers and inspectors who patrol markets and construction sites. The irony is that the locals themselves often treat bricks utilitarianism. It's warm, it breathes. Why should it lie in the grass when it can be put in the hearth? The state is trying to cultivate a new attitude, launching educational projects, school excursions with the mantra, "Each stone is a letter in a book we haven't finished reading yet." It turns out that a brick is not just a building block, but a page of history, for which they now fight with a hammer and a fine.
Fact 64. In Iceland, it's possible to get married under lava. Literally, in a lava cave where ceremonies are officially permitted. The most famous location is the Vidgelmer Cave, formed 1,000 years ago after a volcanic eruption in Borgafjörður. The temperature inside is around 10 degrees. The lighting is soft, reflecting off the lava walls, and the acoustics are like those of an organ hall. The cave is equipped with paths, handrails, and a platform that can accommodate up to 50 people. Since 2016, over 200 marriages have been registered here, including ceremonies with pastors, shamans, and even one costumed magician. The authorities issue permits within a week if safety regulations are met. One of the newlyweds wrote in a blog, "We walked through the dark tunnel and felt like we were marrying not each other, but the earth itself." Organizers offer packages, a lava bouquet, a geothermal dinner, and a souvenir stone inscribed "Married in Fire." Sometimes ceremonies take place in dim light, by candlelight, with vibrations from underground waters.
So, in a country where nature breathes underfoot, love is united not under a dome, but under the flame of solidified lava. And yes, divorce in such a marriage is also possible, but only through the main office in Reykjavik.
Fact 65. In Iran, so-called modesty codes are in effect. Lists of acceptable clothing and behavior. For mannequins. Yes, not for people, but for shop window dolls. In 2009, the Ministry of Islamic Orientation issued a decree regulating the appearance of mannequins in stores. They must not have clearly defined breasts, hips, or buttocks, and they cannot display socks. Female mannequins must be headless or wear headscarves, and male mannequins must not have anatomically emphasized forms. Violators face fines, confiscation of indecent dolls, and even temporary store closures. The ministry's reports refer to such inspections as visual morality inspections. Some entrepreneurs reacted creatively. They began displaying mannequins wrapped from head to toe in fabric, or they painted eyes directly onto the dresses. There were also cases where mannequins were hidden behind curtains and only brought out at a customer's request. One designer confessed to journalists, "I feel like a sculptor who cannot show either face or body." In response to the bans, an underground community of anonymous window dressers even emerged, posting photos of internally free mannequins in closed chats. It turns out that in a country where ideology permeates everyday life, even a plastic doll can become a participant in the struggle for form, literally and metaphorically.
Fact 66. In Switzerland, there's a law prohibiting flushing the toilet after 10 o'clock in the evening in rented accommodation. This legal norm isn't written in the criminal code, but it's widespread in housing contracts and regulated by neighborhood cohabitation rules. The essence is simple. After 10 p.m. and before 6 a.m., it's forbidden to make any household noise that could disturb other residents. The sound of flushing in older buildings, and there are many of them in Switzerland, is considered such a noise source. In Geneva, Basel, and Bern, there have been instances where neighbors called the police on nighttime toilet visitors. One such incident made the press. A woman was fined 200 francs for repeated water noise at night. After this, silent cisterns appeared in plumbing stores, and rental advertisements started to specify toilet use permitted according to schedule. Of course, it all depends on the building and the neighbors. In new apartments, such rules are almost never applied, but in older ones, they are quite common. Some landlords put signs in the toilets, "Quietly at night. Let's preserve sleep." It turns out that in a country where everything is regulated, from banks to dog walking, even a nighttime toilet trip requires social consent. And, however funny it may seem, this is precisely what creates that Swiss silence, audible even at 3 in the morning.
Fact 67. In India, one can be imprisoned for a too loud mobile phone ringing during a movie screening. This is due to a law protecting cultural spaces, adopted in several states including Maharashtra, following complaints from viewers, filmmakers, and even politicians. The law requires cinema-goers to silence their phones before the screening begins. Violation is punishable by a fine of up to 5,000 rupees or administrative detention for up to 24 hours, especially if it occurs during the screening of films in the state or religious language. One resonant case: a viewer in Mumbai turned on a loud game on his phone during a Hindi drama. The security guard called the police. The man was removed, and he spent the night at the station. There were other incidents. For example, a viewer who refused to stand during the anthem before the film was fined for disrespecting the cinema space. Cinema in India is not just entertainment, it's almost a ritual. Some theaters still hold an introductory prayer, and in rural halls, incense is lit before the screening. It turns out that in a country where smartphones have become an extension of the hand, cinema remains a zone of silence, and for violating it, one can lose not only respect, but also freedom. For one evening, but quite officially.
In Canada, it's possible to take a leave of absence for maple syrup harvesting. Officially called seasonal leave for agricultural participation, in Quebec, it's almost exclusively used for the syrup fever period.
The maple sap harvesting season is short, only 3 to 4 weeks in March-April, and requires the whole family's participation. Therefore, the government allows paid leave, up to 5 days, to assist with family businesses. Schools organize syrup weeks with shortened lessons and waffles with fresh syrup during breaks. Villages host fairs where one can sample fresh sap straight from the tree, warm, slightly sweet, and smelling of wood. Some companies even introduce internal syrup holidays, especially IT companies in Montreal, employing people from rural areas. One engineer joked, "In our team, we have 2 languages, French and syrup." Maple syrup is not just a tradition, but a national business. Canada provides over 70% of the world's exports. There's even a strategic syrup reserve, a federal reserve storing thousands of barrels in case of a poor harvest. So, in a country that seems measured, spring brings a short, sweet, and very serious chaos, with paperwork, leaves, and syrup flowing like oil, only tastier. Fact 69th. In Nigeria, there was a court case against a goat. In 2009, in Bauchi State, a crowd apprehended a man suspected of car theft. The chase was short-lived. At the market, according to eyewitnesses, a magical transformation occurred. The suspect allegedly turned into a goat. Upon arrival, the police found a white goat tied to a lamppost. Locals insisted it was the fugitive. The police did not argue. The goat was detained and taken to the station. Local newspapers reported, "The accused is detained. He eats grass and gives no testimony." The story reached a national level, sparking debates between pragmatists and followers of traditional beliefs. Some laughed, others insisted that in a country where many still believe in witchcraft, such a transformation is possible. The court found it impossible to prove the crime and released the goat. The police later admitted that they acted according to the situation to avoid provoking the crowd. This case became a teaching example in local law schools, how to act when the people demand justice and the accused bleats. Ultimately, despite the absurdity, the case entered history. In a country where the supernatural coexists with formal law, even a goat can be at the center of a criminal case. Fact 70. In Japan, there's an official profession, apologizer. In Japanese, it's called shazai daiko, an apology representative. These individuals are hired to apologize on behalf of a client, in person, by phone, or in writing. Reasons vary, from damaged relationships to broken contracts. Some companies even offer premium apologies, with a bow of a specific depth, corresponding to the severity of the offense. A 30-degree bow is formal, 45 degrees is sincere, and 60 degrees is almost self-deprecating. Virtuosos of the bowing speech receive special training. Intonation, facial expressions, the length of the pause before the words "Moshiwake mo gozaimasen," I have nothing to say in my defense. In Tokyo, there's an agency, Shazai Daiko Sha, where services range from $40 to $400. One man hired an apologizer for his ex-girlfriend. She cried, read a poem, and handed over a letter with cherry blossom petals. Corporate apologies also exist. If an employee is rude, the company might send a repentance delegation. Japanese society, strict about outward forms, takes such apologies seriously. It's not so much the guilt itself that matters, but its formal presentation. It turns out that in a country where ritual is more important than words, even guilt can be delegated. The main thing is to bow correctly, and perhaps everything will be forgotten. In Australia, in the early 20th century, there was an official ban on jokes about rabbits. The reason was tragicomic. At the beginning of the 20th century, rabbits, introduced by Europeans, became a real disaster. They multiplied at a catastrophic rate, destroying crops and wiping out native flora. The authorities built a giant fence over 3,000 kilometers long to limit their spread. During this period, a peculiar war against rabbits began. Farmers set traps, carried out shootings, and burned entire colonies.
Against this backdrop, society became painfully sensitive to jokes about the furry invaders. In several cities, local councils passed resolutions not to spread cartoons, comics, and other forms of humor that offend the feelings of those affected by the invasion. Violators could be expelled from the fairgrounds, banned from participating in exhibitions, and in one case, even a seller was fined for having a rabbit with dynamite depicted on his t-shirt. This topic remains sensitive. In Queensland, a law is still in effect prohibiting the keeping of rabbits without special permission. Even circuses and zoos must obtain an exception. Thus, in a country where koalas evoke admiration, the rabbit is almost a historical trauma. Not because it is cute, but because it destroyed the ecosystem and almost destroyed the sense of humor of an entire continent.
Fact 72. In Greece, it's possible to take an exam to achieve the status of a god. This isn't in a religious sense, but within a special philosophical school, Neo-Hellenes, which offers a course in theognosia, theognosy. Students study ancient Greek mythology, styles of speech, rituals, clothing, and the thought processes of the Olympian gods. The course culminates in an exam, an oral defense of a divine concept before a jury of senior adepts. In 2022, one graduate defended the thesis, Zeus as architect of justice, while another presented Artemis, a model of ecological ethics. Upon successful completion, participants receive a diploma with a new name. They can choose to sign, for example, as Theophan, student of Hermes. The state doesn't recognize this, but participants claim the course helps develop charisma, speech skills, and confidence. Some come to regain their voice after difficult life periods. On exam day, participants don togas, adorn their hair with laurel, and deliver speeches standing on a stone circle, precisely replicating an ancient agora. One instructor says, "This isn't theater. It's a trial to become oneself within the myth." Thus, in a country where the ruins of the past tower over the streets, some find themselves not in the future, but in an ancient image. Not to be Zeus, but to learn to hold the lightning within, rather than throwing it at others.
In the Netherlands exists a municipal service dedicated to addressing loneliness. This is not a metaphor, maar een real city department in Amsterdam, officially called the Eenzaamheidsprojectbureau, the Loneliness Project Office. Het was ingesteld in 2016 volgens een serie van studies dat showde dat meer dan 25% van elderlijke residents voelt lonely elke week en 1 in 10 voelt lonely elke dag. De programma begon met een map van social deserts, area's waar mensen elkaar less frequent groeten, don't visit each other en more often complain about the silence. Dan kwamen de Social First Aid Kits, een collectie van brochures, adressen en soms een vriends phonenummer die al heeft geaccepteerd om een lonely persoon te bellen. Stickers appearden in stores. You are welcome here, just like that. Hospitals begonnen asken niet alleen over de patiënts well-being, maar ook over hun sociale cirkel. One van de meest ongebruikelijke initiatieven is de Loneliness Bank. Anyone kan doneren hun tijd, offeren een wandeling, een meal of een conversatie over koffie. One unusual contributie was gekregen bij deze bank. Elderlijke nabeur, ik kan luisteren, ik kan koken soep. Het turns out dat in een country waar everything is logisch tot een millimeter, deze een plaats voor een compleet onlogische, stubborn, hard-to-measure feeling. En ze begonnen te treaten loneliness niet met pillen, maar met contact. Als een municipal service met een postcode en feedback.
Em Brasil, no estado de Minas Gerais, tem uma vila chamada Nova Chronicles. Ela foi fundada por grupo de filósofos, como experimental área sem clocks ou schedules. Usar watches aqui é forbidden, there are no clocks anywhere, e todas as atividades, from meals to meetings, are guided only by natural rhythms. Quando visitantes arrivam, they're given a note that says, "You've entered a timeless zone. Breathe according to your body, not a clock." Everyday life here is shaped by sunrise, the sound of insects, and the movement of shadows. Stores open only when shopkeepers feel ready. Professor Luis Tales, one of the founders, says, "We don't reject time itself, we reject the pressure of measuring it."
The project started in 1999 and still sparks debate. Some see it as a utopia for idealists. Others find it therapeutic, a place where you can spend a week without rushing or worrying about schedules. Psychologists have noticed that visitors experience lower stress levels. One guest joked, "First, you lose track of time, then you realize you don't even need it." So, in a country famous for samba rhythms and traffic jams, some people have chosen to abandon all rhythms, not to stop time, but to let it flow freely without clocks or schedules.
Fact 75th. In the Czech Republic, a tax on televisions persists to this day, regardless of usage. The law concerning the collection of funds for public broadcasting was passed in the 1990s and remains in effect. Every television owner, according to census data or upon purchasing a new set, is obligated to pay approximately 240 crowns monthly, even if the television is stored in a closet. Non-payment results in fines, and in some cases, inspectors have the right to visit and request to see the device. In the digital age, this law has become a source of considerable debate. Many argue, "I watch everything online, why should I pay for broadcast television?" The government responds that public broadcasting is not just about content, but also about the institution itself. Even if you don't watch it, it exists, it maintains standards, and it serves a purpose. In the 2010s, Parliament discussed replacing the tax with voluntary subscriptions. But television companies strongly opposed this, stating, "This is the end of television as a social obligation." Thus, in a country increasingly debating freedom of choice, the television has become a battleground, not between channels, but between form and content. You may not turn on the screen, but you pay for its existence. As a symbol, as an archive, as a background that may one day again become a stage.
In Ethiopia, time flows differently than in the rest of the world. They use what's called Ethiopian time, which begins at 6 in the morning, sunrise. Therefore, 7 o'clock in the morning by international time is considered the first hour of the day in Ethiopia, 9 o'clock is the third, and midnight is the sixth hour of the night. This difference necessitates constant clarifications, signs on buses, guides for tourists, even special dual clocks in train stations, one showing global time, the other local. In spoken language, they often clarify, European time or hours. In rural areas, the international time system is practically unused. Even schools and courts publish schedules in both versions. A judge in Addis Ababa admitted, "Sometimes we get confused ourselves, but it's ours." The sun-based timekeeping may seem anachronistic, but behind it lies a philosophy to live in rhythm with nature, not with arbitrarily set numbers. In a country with its own calendar, 7 years behind the Gregorian calendar, where a year can consist of 13 months, even time is part of cultural self-identification. Therefore, being late there isn't always being late. Sometimes it's simply a different time.
Fact 77th. In Singapore, chewing gum has been officially banned since 1992. This ban is strictly enforced with the characteristic Singaporean meticulousness. The reason is not oral hygiene, but street cleanliness and the smooth operation of public transport. In the late 1980s, the authorities faced a wave of minor vandalism involving chewing gum. It was stuck to subway doors, jammed in elevator locks, and left on benches. A particularly serious incident occurred when chewing gum blocked a photo cell in the subway, nearly causing a train to fail to stop in time. Following this, then Prime Minister Lee Kuan Yew declared, "Freedom ends where the sticky mass begins." A complete ban on the import, sale, and distribution of chewing gum was subsequently implemented. Violators face fines of up to 2,000 Singapore dollars. The only exception is therapeutic chewing gum, dispensed by prescription, for example, to help people quit smoking. Tourists are often surprised by the ban. Changi Airport even has a sign that reads, "No gum." There have been instances of chewing gum being confiscated at the border, treated as contraband. Some have attempted to dispose of their gum before reaching the border, spitting it out at the checkpoint. Today, Singapore's streets shine with cleanliness, and the subway runs like clockwork. In this city-state, where even spitting on the ground is an offense,
Chewing gum has become a symbol of rebellious saliva. If you want to just chew, you'll have to explain yourself to the police.
Mongols, especially in the desert regions of Gobi, where the nearest road is tens of kilometers away, one can still encounter a postman riding a camel. This is the only way to deliver mail to these remote areas. The Mongolian State Postal Service, Mongol Shudian, officially recognizes camels as high passability transport. In cold weather, they are replaced by horses or motorcycles, but in summer, only camel caravans are used. The postman receives a mailbag, a map, and a supply of kumis. One of them, Mr. Biamba, has been working this route for over 20 years. He says, "When a sandstorm comes, I hide the letters under myself. Sometimes I sleep with them." Letters are not just paper. They are documents, notifications, and sometimes the only messenger from family. In some villages, people come out to meet the postman. An hour before his arrival, a dusty trail is visible and excitement begins. There are routes where mail is delivered twice a month. In the 2020s, there were ideas to replace camels with drones, but residents protested. A camel not only delivers mail, but also brings the smell of the steppe, a trace, a living presence. It turns out that in a country where the nomadic spirit is still strong, even mail travels like a nomad, slowly across the sand with the sound of hoofs. And it reaches where there is no internet, but there is expectation.
Fact 79. In some Polish villages, dying is forbidden. This isn't a joke, but a legal absurdity born from tragedy, the lack of a cemetery. In the village of Mieszkowo in the Podkarpackie Voivodeship, the local cemetery was closed several years ago due to sanitary regulations. The groundwater level proved too high. Until a new one is built, burials are prohibited. But construction has dragged on and people have continued to die. So the local council issued a resolution. We ask you to refrain from dying until the completion of infrastructure works. The wording is absurd, but legally it has the status of a temporary order. Similar cases have occurred in other villages, for example in Jastrzębie, where the only undertaker left and the district was left without a funeral service. There they issued an appeal. Please give us advance notice if you are planning to die, we will look for a car. The stories went viral in the media, causing a flurry of memes, but the essence remained. Infrastructure may not keep pace with biology. In response to criticism, one official said, "We didn't forbid death. We simply reminded that death also requires planning." It turns out that in 21st century Europe, death remains unpredictable. But if you live in a small Polish village, it can also be illegal, temporarily, until the completion of the works.
Fact 80. In South Africa, near Johannesburg, there's a former gold mine that has been repurposed for an unusual use. Abandoned in the early 2000s, it first attracted illegal miners, then speleologists studying stalactites, and finally, agricultural engineers. In 2018, Golden Greens Company transformed part of the mine complex into a vertical hydroponic farm. The temperature is stable, the lighting is artificial, water circulates through pipes, and the harvest is independent of the climate. Lettuce, spinach, and arugula are grown in former mine workings where explosions and picks once echoed. One worker said, "We don't dig for gold, we dig for freshness." The produce is supplied to Johannesburg restaurants with the label, "Grown below ground." The project proved economically viable. No pests, low costs, and zero soil use. The authorities supported the idea as an example of sustainable development. There are plans to open a mushroom cultivation area in the mine and later an educational center. So, where the earth was once depleted, it is now nourished. From the bottom up, the mine no longer sounds like a sentence. It has become a greenhouse, with greenery, not dust.
Fact 81. In Liechtenstein, it's possible to rent the entire country. Since 2010, an official agreement has been in place, allowing individuals or companies to rent Liechtenstein in its entirety, for a day or longer. This initiative arose from a partnership between the Principality's government and the American entertainment agency Rent a Nation. The rental cost starts at $700,000 per day. For this sum, the client receives a symbolic key to the state, the ability to display their personal symbols, rename streets, and hold a private ceremony in Parliament. Signage changes for the rental period, a special guest passport is issued, and one of the ministers acts as an honorary guide. The first interested party was a rap group planning a private album presentation. However, the deal fell through. The musicians wanted complete anonymity, while Liechtenstein insisted on upholding its visa regime. Later, the country was rented for corporate training. Employees lived in different villages, studied local crafts, and held a negotiation session in the alpine pastures. The princely family doesn't object. As long as we have a flag, we can share it. It turns out that in Europe, where everything is governed by laws, one tiny enclave has found a way to earn money by pretending to be a whole world. And sometimes it becomes one.
Fact 82. In Bangladesh, there exists the profession of a train pusher. It originated in Dhaka, the country's capital, where suburban trains are so overcrowded that regular controllers cannot cope. The pusher's task is to push people into the carriages before departure and prevent them from falling out. This practice emerged in the 1990s when rail transport became the main mode of transport for migrants and workers. During morning and evening rush hours, the platform transforms into a seething mass. Hundreds of people, bags, children, bags of groceries. The train has no time to wait. Then appeared Dhaka Dars, people in bright vests, paid by the railway or even by the passengers themselves. They run along the carriage shouting, "Move to the left," pushing with their hands, sometimes with their feet. One such worker says, "The main thing is not to cause pain, but also not to let anyone be left behind." The work is dangerous. There have been injuries, even fatalities, but the demand does not decrease. Pushers work as a team with the driver. When the latter gives a signal, they manage to move away in seconds. Tourists initially perceive this as a circus, but locals call them engines of human determination. It turns out that in a country with one of the highest population densities in the world, even boarding a train requires a special profession. Strong hands, a precise elbow, and an understanding that a push is not violence, but salvation. Fact number 83. In Finland, instead of a crib, a baby receives a box. Since 1938, the state has been giving every expectant mother a so-called maternity package, äitispakaus. It's a large cardboard box containing clothes, diapers, thermometers, toys, creams, and a mattress. Most importantly, the box itself is designed to be the baby's first crib. It has a soft bottom, sides, and ventilation holes. Mothers in rural areas, far from maternity hospitals, began using it for newborns. It's convenient, safe, and portable. This solution halved infant mortality. To receive the box, one only needs to undergo initial medical checkups and register for prenatal care. This encourages early diagnosis and health care. The kit includes items for all seasons in neutral colors. Some call it a room in a box. A tradition has even emerged of photographing the baby in the box on their first day of life. In the 2010s, the box became an export phenomenon, copied by Great Britain, Canada, and India. But in Finland, it's not just a box, it's a symbol. The state takes you in its arms from the first minute. In a country where silence is golden, care is expressed not in words, but in the cardboard where the future sleeps. Fact 84. In Turkmenistan, black is forbidden. In 2018, the authorities introduced an unofficial but widespread ban on black cars, and later on black clothing. Police officers stopped cars of the wrong color, demanding repainting. Owners of black Toyotas and Mercedes paid thousands of dollars to repaint their cars white or silver. Black items were confiscated at the entrance to government buildings and removed from shop windows in the markets. It all started with the spread of a superstition allegedly voiced by the president himself. Black color brings misfortune. Nothing was officially confirmed, but the rules spread quickly. Hairdressers stopped doing black hair coloring, designers sewing dark dresses. One resident of Ashgabat complained to journalists, "I have a black car, a black suit, and a black cat. Now I'm outside the law." Some found a way out. They wore dark blue, almost black, on the verge of what's allowed. It turns out that in a country where the cult of personality is combined with ornamental aesthetics, color has become not just a form, but an ideology. And black, which is considered a classic in fashion, suddenly turned out to be the color of opposition, or at least suspicion.
Fact 85. In Norway, it is officially possible to own a mountain. This ownership is documented, including a cadastral number, and is inheritable. This is not a metaphor. The country has a system where almost all mountains, forests, and fjords are in private or communal ownership. Sometimes an entire peak belongs to one person or family. One such case is Storhovden Mountain in Trøndelag County. It has been privately owned by the Bakken family since the end of the 19th century. Local residents can organize a census for a symbolic fee, but the owner has the right to refuse access. In 2015, a tourist complained that he was not allowed onto a slope where rare herbs grew. The reply was curt, "It's our grass." In another instance, the owner rented part of the slope for filming a Viking movie, receiving 100,000 kroner in rent. The state, however, retains the right of public access if the mountain is recognized as a natural treasure. In such cases, a separate agreement is made. There are even websites selling mountains. Plot with a panorama, virginity guaranteed. So, in a country where nature is considered a value, it is simultaneously a commodity. And if you want to say, "This is my mountain," in Norway, you can do so not only poetically, but also legally. Fact 86. In Argentina, there's a law allowing grandmothers to receive a pension for raising their grandchildren. This rule emerged in the early 2000s when it became clear that tens of thousands of children in the country were living with their grandparents due to parental emigration, poverty, or death. Formerly, the pension system didn't account for this. Pension calculation was based solely on the parents' work history and contributions. Therefore, the parliament passed the law supporting mediated motherhood. A grandmother officially caring for her grandchildren can receive a pension supplement or, if she lacks work history, a so-called social pension for upbringing. To receive it, documents are required: school certificates, medical records, and proof of guardianship. One point particularly touched society. Time spent at parent-teacher meetings counts as a contribution to upbringing. There were instances where grandmothers submitted drawings and notebooks as evidence. In the provinces, respect points, consultations for elderly guardians, began to open. One official stated, "If the state recognizes work, it must also recognize care." It turns out that in a country where tango teaches holding and leading, grandmothers not only hold their grandchildren, but support entire families. Now, this is not only love, but also an official profession. Fact 87. In Bhutan, the economy is assessed not by monetary figures, but by the happiness of its people. Since 1972, the Gross National Happiness (GNH) Index has been in effect. It emerged as an alternative to the traditional Gross Domestic Product (GDP). The then-King Jigme Singye Wangchuck stated that well-being is not measured by the quantity of goods produced. Instead, he proposed 4 criteria: sustainable development, environmental protection, cultural preservation, and good governance. Every few years, the government conducts large-scale surveys. How often do you laugh? Do you have time for meditation? How would you rate your relationships with your neighbors? The surveys include dozens of parameters, ranging from sleep quality to self-perception. Policy is formed based on this data. For example, if a region shows a decreasing happiness index, psychologists are sent there. Festivals are organized, and houses are repaired. Schools teach children not only mathematics, but also gratitude. In one classroom, each day begins with the phrase, "Thank you that I am alive."
Critics call the system naive and a cover for poverty. But the Bhutanese respond, "We are not against growth, we are for growth with a smile." It turns out that in a country where television appeared only in 1999, measuring happiness has become a state task. And even if it doesn't always work perfectly, it definitely helps to live a better life. Fact 88. Israel has one of the strictest noise regulations in the world. From 11 p.m. to 7 a.m., not only loud music and construction work are prohibited, but also noise from furniture. The law Sheket Leila, Night Quiet, provides for a fine for sounds exceeding 40 decibels in apartment buildings. This means you cannot move chairs without floor protectors, slam doors, or wash dishes noisily. This is especially strictly observed in new residential complexes where special quiet agreements are concluded. Residents undertake to observe above-standard quiet up to the prohibition of using a washing machine at night. In one case, neighbors sued a young couple for loud footsteps on the parquet floor, and the judge ruled either a carpet or compensation. In response to such norms, the movement Sheket B'Sechel, Quiet with Reason, appeared, advocating for humane nocturnal coexistence, not to report because of a child's prying, not to call the police because of a falling toy. However, the police do respond. Dozens of calls are registered in large cities overnight. It turns out that in a country where the daytime street noise is deafening, night is the time of the law. And if silence is golden, then in Israel it is paid for with a receipt for a fine. Fact number 89. In North Korea, there are officially 87 approved hairstyles. Citizens are only allowed to choose haircuts from this catalog approved by the authorities. The list is divided by gender, 28 options for men and 59 for women. The catalog is displayed in every hair salon, and hairdressers are obliged to follow it strictly. Deviation from the approved styles can be considered a violation of public order. Short hair is prescribed for married women. Girls under 25 are allowed braids and curls, but not below the shoulder blades. Men are prescribed a parting, a boxer cut, or a military cut, no longer than 5 centimeters. In 2015, a campaign for a patriotic haircut was launched in Pyongyang, implying a hairstyle similar to that worn by Kim Jong-un. Salons were decorated with posters, "Get a haircut with respect for the motherland." In practice, control is not always strict, especially in the provinces. However, in the capital and during mass events, hairdressers work on the principle of one form, one nation. Therefore, in a country where individuality is equated with suspicion, even hair is subject to the state. If a haircut reflects the inner world, then in North Korea, this world is short, neat, and strictly regulated. Fact 90. In Iceland, there is still a naming committee. This is an official government body that decides whether a child can be given the name chosen by their parents. The committee was founded in 1991 to protect the language from foreign influences and preserve the traditional naming system where the surname is derived from the father's name. If a name does not conform to the grammar and phonetics of the Icelandic language, it may be prohibited. In 2013, the country discussed a high-profile case. A girl named Blair, named after a favorite character from an American TV series, was not officially recognized. The document stated, "Girl." The parents sued and lost. The committee argues that the name should be easily declined, not violate linguistic tradition, and not cause pronunciation difficulties. As of the 2020s, the list of permissible names includes about 1,800 masculine and 1,900 feminine names. Any new name is submitted for consideration with an explanation of its meaning and origin. There have been curious cases. The name Lucifer, rejected. Zlatan, accepted, because it sounds harmonious. It turns out that in a country where the phone book is ordered by first name, not surname, the name is not just a choice. It's part of the culture. And if you want to stand out, first ask the language, then the committee. Fact 91. In Venezuela, on the eve of elections, the internet is shut down. Officially, this is under the pretext of preventing the spread of fake news and ensuring information hygiene. For the last 10 years, on election days, there have been mass disruptions in network access. Social media platforms are unavailable, messengers are disconnected, and websites showing vote counts are down. The organization NetBlocks, which monitors internet freedom, recorded that on the day of the presidential elections in 2018, access to major resources was restricted for 80% of the country's providers. The authorities claim this is a fight against foreign interference. The opposition replies, this is a fight against the truth. In response, users create workarounds. VPN addresses are circulated in messengers. Schools teach high school students how to bypass the darkness. And illegal Wi-Fi hotspots on batteries operate in rural areas. One user jokes, "We have internet like elections. It seems to be there, but it doesn't work." It turns out that in a country where oil flows but products are rationed, even the internet becomes a political tool. Not a means of communication, but a means of control. And on such days, even an old radio seems like a voice of freedom.
Fact 92. In Tajikistan, lavish weddings are officially banned. The law on the regulation of customs and traditions, in effect since 2007, strictly limits the number of guests, dishes, cars, and even the duration of the celebration. The maximum is 150 guests, no more than one hot dish, one musical performance, and no more than 3 cars in the wedding procession. The reason is poverty. Families held grandiose weddings, incurring debts, selling livestock, and even houses to save face. The law was passed after a series of tragedies. In one case, the father of the groom died of a heart attack the day after the wedding due to debts. Control is strict. Tradition inspectors patrol the cities, photographing dishes, recording car numbers, and counting portions. Violators are fined and sometimes summoned for an explanatory conversation in the mahalla. In response, underground weddings appeared. Guests are invited in a second round. Food is prepared for neighbors but brought to the hall. Some families whisper recipes for invisible plov to each other. It turns out that in a country where tradition is almost a religion, the state is trying to curb it, so that happiness is not in luxury, but in peace, or at least in a balance between love and cutlets.
Fact 93. In Iran, smiling in passport photos is forbidden. The reason is formally simple. Biometric data must be accurate. The face neutral, lips closed, and facial expressions absent. However, behind this dry technical regulation lies a cultural and political subtext. In 2011, the authorities issued an instruction. The face must reflect the seriousness of a citizen of the Islamic Republic. This applies not only to passports, but also to student IDs, driver's licenses, and even passes to government institutions. Signs in photo studios read, "Please maintain neutrality." Photographers joke, "If you smile, we'll be fined." A flash mob spread on social media. People showed photos before Iranian processing and after. The difference is like that between an invitation for tea and a summons to an investigator. In response to criticism, one official stated, "A serious face is not sadness, it is respect for the procedure." It turns out that in a country where street fashion fights against regulations, even a photograph becomes an arena of struggle between a living person and the image approved by the system. And if you don't smile in your passport photo, it's not because you're sad. It's simply ordered that way.
Fact 94. In Canada, there's a city where dying is forbidden. This is Longyearbyen, the administrative center of the Svalbard archipelago. Located in the Arctic zone and formerly belonging to Norway, but historically having Canadian traces in industrial expansion. Local authorities established a ban. Burials in permafrost are impossible. Bodies don't decompose. They remain frozen for decades. At the beginning of the 20th century, after a series of influenza epidemics, it became clear that the buried bodies retained an active virus. Then an unprecedented decision was made. The dead are transported to the mainland.
If a person becomes fatally ill, they are evacuated thousands of kilometers. Locals joke, "You can live here, dying, not here." Longyear buying itself has no maternity hospital, or cemetery. Everything is outside. Tourists initially don't believe it. A city without death? But a sign hangs at the entrance. Take care of your health. It's the only thing you'll leave here. It turns out that in a world where death is a universal finale, one polar city decided to postpone it. Not philosophically, but logistically. And in this icy paradox, permafrost, where there is no place for the finale. Fact 95th. In India, there exists a profession, a professional mourner. It is called Rudali, the weeping woman. According to ancient tradition, especially in the rural areas of Rajasthan and Bihar, women are hired to lament the deceased. This is not simply weeping, but a theatrical, trained performance, voice, intonation, text, gestures. It is believed that loud weeping helps the soul to pass into the other world. Furthermore, men from the upper castes cannot publicly express emotions, and therefore grief is delegated. The Rudali comes to the house of the deceased, learns their biography, and based on it composes a lament. This can be a poetic monologue, a song, or a rhythmic moan. The work is dangerous. One must know the boundaries between sincerity and performance. There have been cases where families quarreled. She cried louder at the neighbor's funeral. In 1993, director Kalpana Lajmi created the film Rudali, which sparked a wave of discussions. Is it ethical to order grief, or is it a cultural obligation? Today, the profession has almost disappeared, but in some regions it is still passed down through the female line. It turns out that in a country where emotion is sacred, grief is also a craft. And someone must perform it so that others can remain silent. Fact 96. In Italy, there's a city where they ask forgiveness for wasted bread. This is Genoa, where an ancient guild tradition persists. Every spring, bakers bring a symbolic loaf to St. Lawrence Square as an apology for all the bread baked poorly or discarded during the year. The rite is called Pane del Perdono, bread of forgiveness. Its origins go back to the 14th century, when years of famine alternated with abundance, and bread was considered not just food, but a sacred gift. A merchant threw away a stale loaf, and the city experienced a drought. Locals saw this as a sign. Since then, the Bakers Guild gathers annually. They bake a large round loaf, carry it to the church, where the priest says, "Let us forgive those who neglected the blessing." After the ceremony, the loaf is shared among the poor. Today, this event has become a festival, with flags, the scent of rosemary and cinnamon, and competitions for the best loaf. But the essence remains unchanged. Bread demands respect. Even in the 21st century, even in a supermarket. It turns out that in a country where food is an art, one piece can be a prayer, or an apology, or both at once.
Fact 97. In Japan, there exists an official body odor test. It's called Nioi Kensa, olfactory inspection, and is conducted in some companies, especially during the summer months. The reason is Japanese corporate culture, where personal hygiene is considered part of professionalism. Large firms such as Kao Corporation or Shiseido employ specially trained staff, olfactory inspectors who have undergone certification. They assess the smell of sweat, breath, hair, and clothing. The procedure is voluntary, but refusal is often perceived as a sign of unsuitability for teamwork. Before the inspection, the employee is asked not to eat anything with a strong aroma, not to use perfume, and not to smoke. Then there is a short conversation, during which the inspector circles the person from different sides and makes notes. The assessment is on a scale of 0 to 10, where above 5 is an undesirable level. If the threshold is exceeded, recommendations are given: deodorant, a change of clothes, a visit to a doctor. Some companies even introduce smell days, reminders about personal hygiene throughout the office. There are courses on olfactory etiquette where they teach how to apologize for the smell if it does appear. It turns out that in a country where nobody will say something unpleasant to your face, even body odor has become a reason for an institute.
And if you want to climb the career ladder, first make sure that you don't have a lingering smell.
Fakt 98. V České republice je možné tejít Recovery Holiday. Oficiálně kolana Health Restoration Holiday, samokompanie, partikulárně v kreativních industriích, recognize it jako část své work kultury. Ta praxe began in Prague in the early 2010s, when design a IT startups introduced an informal rule. If you were at a corporate event and can't come to work in the morning, it's better to stay home than to arrive with bloodshot eyes. One director explained, "We value efficiency, not presence. Your head should be working, not hurting." Over time, these days were included in employment contracts, up to 3 per year without explanation. The main thing is to notify before 10 in the morning. Some companies send out memos. If you're feeling unwell, don't come in, recover and return with new ideas. There were, of course, abuses. One employee managed to take a recovery holiday after a Zoom party. But overall, the system has taken root. Psychologists say this isn't an encouragement of drunkenness, but an acknowledgement of reality, especially in a country where beer is almost as common as coffee. It turns out that in a society where honesty is more important than formality, even weakness can be institutionalized. The main thing is not to make it the norm, but to turn it into a day of sober decision-making.
Fact 99. In Estonia, it's possible to vote online. It's the first country in the world where electronic voting has been used at the national level since 2005. It all started with the ID card, a personal digital signature that almost every citizen possesses. With it, one can receive prescriptions, pay taxes, sign contracts, and vote. During elections, the system opens a few days before the official date. The user logs in using their card, sees the ballot, and makes their choice. If they change their mind, they can re-vote, and the system will register the last vote. Security is ensured through encryption and double identity verification. There have been no serious breaches reported throughout the system's existence. Voter turnout has increased by 15%. Elderly people are taught how to use tablets, and young people vote from other countries. One student from London wrote, "I vote on the bus, on my way to a lecture." Some criticize the system, saying that the solemnity of the process is lost. But Estonians reply, "The solemnity is in freedom, not in a booth." It turns out that in a country where forests are connected by Wi-Fi, even democracy is digitized, and the voice is heard through the cable, no quieter than from a tribune.
In Switzerland, it is forbidden to keep only one guinea pig. A law passed in 2008 classifies these animals as a social species, meaning that keeping them alone is considered animal cruelty. A minimum of 2 is required. This is not a formality. The owner must provide documentation proving the acquisition of a second animal. If one of them dies, a replacement must be found within 1 month. The country has a guinea pig rental service. One can temporarily borrow an animal to avoid leaving the surviving guinea pig alone. Veterinarians issue certificates stating, "Cannot live alone." This law is part of a broader animal rights reform, including a ban on boiling lobsters, requirements for humane dog walking, and a mandate to teach fish proper orientation in aquariums. The Swiss explained this is not eccentricity, but respect. One deputy said, "If you take a life, be it society." It turns out that in a country where clocks are accurate to the second, even a rodent should not be lonely. Having one hamster is fine, but one guinea pig is a problem, a legal one.